everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer. And that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me as always, and I'll make the joke this time, my own little scrap launcher. It's
No! 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 I made it out on the first introduction. Thanks, folks. Or actually, no. Thanks, Vince, for being a terrible person and not unmuting yourself.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say.
I can hear you. Everybody should be able to hear me now, I assume. It looks like it, yes. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that, everybody. I'll cut out the silent part at the beginning once I edit. The problem is when I have this booted up, what happens is I have to start this whole stream and then like basically put it in pause mode for like hours and hours before this actually goes live. And so I mute it because I don't want it just picking up every random sound in the world if I'm talking or whatever. And then I forget to unmute myself before we go live. So I need to make myself a checklist that says, did you unmute? Did you change the stream key? You know, like go down this list.
That is so you.
Yeah, indeed. At any rate, tonight we're talking conversions, but of course we're also going to talk about some other fun stuff. We're going to talk about hashtag ban Slaanesh. I learned something new today. I learned that if you put a hashtag into a YouTube description, it'll then tag the video with that, and it'll like show up on the left under the name of the video. So that's
it's
neat.
a thing now. You've created it. It's a thing now.
Yeah, I guess Rob didn't formally hashtag it as ban Slaanesh, but I did. If you're gonna do something in the modern world, Rob, geez, come on. Did you just get on social media yesterday? I mean, you make it a hashtag. That's how we get things done in the modern world, right? That's all that works. Make hashtags. That's how you solve problems. In the modern world, problems are solved with words. Words like hashtag ban Slaanesh. So, at any rate, we're going to talk through that. But of course, we're also going to talk about some news. And boy, oh boy, goody, do we have a lot of it this week. Because we have had, this is a packed week. So, Tom, what do we got for the news?
I want to talk about that rumor engine.
I don't. I didn't even bring up the image because it's a 40K thing.
No, stop your terrible lies. It needs to be a Order of Azir Witch Hunter army.
That's a 40K thing. It's a 40K gun. I'm not even bringing it up, Tom. I have an Ogre picture up on the screen for everybody.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about ogres.
Yes, so we got a 40K gun. It looks like another Inquisitor or something like that. My hope would actually be, if you want real talk about what I think it is, I hope we're finally getting the Inquisitor kill team. That's, that kind of a thing. They had put out some test rolls in White Dwarf.
Yeah.
And something like that. I would love it if it was like an ornate gun to like a Rogue Trader or another Inquisitor team or something like that. They've been exploring a lot of that. They've done a couple different Rogue Traders. I'd love more of that stuff. Those are all cool minis. So, but it's a 40K thing. Anywho, so yes, this week we got the big announcement. Another week of 2 books going up on pre-order. We're rolling them out, folks. Choo choo. Get on the book train. It's leaving. Ogres. The Bone Daddies. I'm glad to see Bone Daddies is catching on. That's what they are. They're Bone Daddies. Let's all agree right now, all of us watching, that we're never going to use the real name. It's just going to be the Bone Daddies. And I already know how much that drives certain people nuts, and that's why I'm more excited for it, because it's funny to me. And so Bone Daddies, yes, those two, as well as the Feast of Bones. Feast of Bones, Tom. I'm sorry to say, this has falsified one of your predictions off of our ring-a-ding-ding, I'll predict a thing show.
Yeah, let me say this. Yeah, I'm not surprised. that was one of my long shot calls, right? Was that that it was going to be something not expected. That said, it's also probably going to falsify the fact that we're going to get a new kit. Remember, I took a long shot with the Nobblers?
Oh, yeah, sure. No, they're not in there.
Yeah. So, I figured that all of most of my Ogre stuff is going to be swing and a miss, which, okay.
That's all right. To be honest, I looked back at our predictions in light of the what we got today, because I did go and watch I went back and watched the video that Ben Johnson did today and Nick Horth or whatever and Wade, and which was really good, by the way. And I don't think there is a lot of wrong predictions off of our ring-a-ding-ding show. Let me just say, we took a lot of shots on goal. Not many got in. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, for any of those that think that like we have inside sources that are like leaking stuff to us, that's not true.
No,
Like,
no, nobody gives us anything.
Yes, the prediction show should demonstrate that.
Right. I wish Derek. Derek said so. Vince wins the kit. We're not there yet. There's still some predictions not to be known, but I can say there's already a lot of red lines on that sheet. That's for sure.
Yes.
But at any rate, yeah. So again, 2 books. We've got the big box set, which is, I think, at this point the only. That's where the Tyrant's going to be, right? They haven't announced the Tyrant actually being available separately. The new Tyrant.
Yeah, it'll be at least 6 to 9 months.
Could be. I mean, sometimes these things actually become available, and many times they do not. But at this point, they said, yeah, if you want it, it's the only time we're announcing it being available at the moment is within the Feast of Bones kit.
Well, yeah, I mean, my exhortation would be like, show me a recent box character that's shown up. Like nothing.
All the ones from this year. Yeah, nothing from this year shown up. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the Bombardier from the Skaven, like none of it. Yeah. None of it is materialized.
Yep, I agree.
Ugh.
Which I don't like. Again, I'll say it again and again. For a lot of stuff, I don't really care because like you can convert any of that stuff. Like the Arch Revenant is just a tree revenant with some wings on him. It's not hard. Like that's the easiest conversion in the universe. The the Bombardier is just a dude with a rocket. Like many kits have rockets, you know what I mean? Like the Hellstorm rocket battery comes with a bunch of rockets. Like I've converted 2 of them. I'm pretty sure other people could too. So, yeah, the point being is that like that stuff can be gotten or converted, but some of it's real hard. The Harpist from like Slaanesh is a good example of one that I'm glad they released separately because that would have been like an impossible conversion, right?
Ugh.
That's like the last one I can think of that where they did end up releasing it separately, which was the Harpist. Yeah, you can go by just her.
That's been a while.
Yeah, I mean that was out of Wrath and Rapture at like the end of last year, and then obviously she came out with the Slaanesh release, right? So I mean there was some before that, right? So but that's the last one in the order I can think of. So hey, great day if you happen to be reselling stuff on eBay, I guess. So wonderful. I'm not excited about that, but a lot of good stuff there in the news as far as that goes. We got a lot of confirmation. They did the Maw Tribe show today. They're doing the Bone Daddies show next week. And, there was a lot of stuff they unpacked. So for those who didn't get a chance to watch the show, I did watch it and compile some facts. So here are some facts.
Lead us through those, Vince.
All right. So, by the way, we know the Feast of Bones kit is going to be $195 US, and I think it's like other places in the world. I think in New Zealand you can get like that or a small mid-sized sedan, something like that. But like
the point being that the dual army boxes have went up in cost.
That's yeah. They're up to they went up to $195. But it didn't go up to the. I think everybody was afraid that like the Phoenix Rising, which was $230, would be the new watermark, and that's not the case. So, okay, everything from the old range has migrated across for the ogres, meaning they did not kill any kits. But upside, none of the kits got removed. So man-eaters are still there, firebellies are still there. Both butchers are still there. But they're different now. They're different characters. So, like, the standalone butcher is a character, and the guy hauling around the cauldron that used to be the special character, he's now the slaughtermaster. So
yeah, that just seems like a mistake.
Yeah, and they're all fine cast. So, like, the hunter is still there, and, like, everything is still there. All of it. So, like, if your question is, this fig in the ogre army, is it still part of this combined book? By the way, that's ogres or PCR, right? Does it still exist? Does it have rules? Yes. The answer is yes. So upside, yay, all your cool figs are still there and still totally usable. Downside, all those figs are still fine cast. if you're collecting new. If you already have your force, hey, great, it's a win. If you were looking to buy new, enjoy the fine cast.
If
And
you're looking
or
for
get them
you,
conversions
enjoy
ready.
the double army box.
Sure.
Buy lots of them.
Or get ready to do some conversions, right? Because the
Right.
reality is you do have a good number of plastic kits that you could convert off of. And in fact, one of the things they talked about in there is a whole section in the Maw Tribes book on conversions, because the Ogre
Right.
forces being a very like non-militaristic force, as it were. They're not like Stormcast or somebody like that, or the cities.
Right.
They have like a very they have very unique markings and adornments, and will frequently like display trophies on themselves and things like that. So you can just, they talked a bunch about them doing a bunch of conversions. So
Sweet.
and they actually gave some cool pictures from there that were really nice. Because keep in mind, those Ogre kits, they're still really quality plastic. I stand behind the Ogre kit. Just the regular Ogre, I think they're called they're Ogre Bull. That's not what they're called anymore now. They have another new name, which I am not remembering. Their third naming or whatever. But those kits, like them and the Mornfang and the all the big Huskar
Lead belchers.
guy, yeah, and the lead belchers, whatever, the big guy on the big ogre on the mount, right?
Yep.
The frost lord and stuff. Those kits come with a lot of extra pieces, like a lot of extra pieces, and I've used tons of that stuff for conversions, so that's pretty cool. You get a lot of extra like weapons and guns and little armor pieces, and it's cool. Okay. Oh, yes, Doom is saying move on. He doesn't need to convert anything. Okay, here we go. Other facts. The Firebelly obviously is still a spellcaster, and he has a full-on lore. Like there is, and you should expect a lot of fun spells. I think they mentioned one called Greasy Exaltation, which just made me think of the Greasy Strangler. But that's, expect a lot of food-related puns and gut and eating-related puns. There are 2 new army-wide rules they previewed that are pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. So here's the first one. Trampling Charge. So Trampling Charge gives them back mortal wounds on the charge, which if you're a old school... Thank you, Gluttons, everybody said it in the chat. Yes, is their new name. If you played Ogres back in Warhammer Fantasy days, you know that when Ogres charged you, if you rolled a certain number, they did impact hits, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So now what happens is when Ogres charge you, you get to roll a number of dice equal to your charge roll. Okay? So like if you roll an 8 on your charge, then you get to roll 8 dice. For every 6 up, you deal a mortal wound. However, if the unit has 10 or more models or is a monster, you do the wounds on a 4+. Okay?
Now, is it roll or result?
I don't know what you mean. Oh, unmodified roll. Sorry, for the charge. Yes. The things that bonus your charge do not give you additional dice. It is the unmodified charge roll. Okay?
Got it. Yep.
So, like, Cogs isn't helping you here or stuff like that. The second rule, and the most important one, the one we talked about that needed to be added, I think we might have even called the name. I've got to go back and watch the show. But the second rule is called Might is Right. So, yeah. Might is right. Ogre models count as 2 models for purposes of taking objectives, but if they are monsters, they count as 10. Manswine, what are you saying I'm incorrect about? Manswine is saying I was incorrect about something. What did I mess up, buddy? Because I wrote all this down, but if I missed something, you can please tell me. Okay. Let's see. Oh, sorry. It's 8, not 10. I apologize. Thank you, Manswine. There you go. Not 10 to get the +2 to charge. Well, sure. Totally changes the roll, but no. Good correction. You do it. People pulling the actually on me. Anyways, no, it's fine. Thank you. So yes, so that's good trampling charge. And yeah, so regular ogres count as 2 models, monsters count as 10. Fantastic. Great. Wonderful. Boom. Back in the objective. Book done. Solved it. Ogres are good now. All the rest is just a reprint of whatever was in. There's nothing else. No, there's more stuff. Their other sort of army-wide rule is hungry versus eating. So, yeah, this is a pretty fascinating little thing here. So, ogres are always either hungry, or eating. Okay? They can only
Okay.
exist in 2 states.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
They're hungry if they're more than 3 inches away from an enemy, i.e., if they're not in combat, right?
Okay. So this is determined on the unit.
Yeah.
Like each unit. Okay.
Each unit. Yep. So a unit is hungry if it's more than 3 inches away from an enemy, if it's not in combat. In that case, it gets +2 to move.
Okay.
All right. So, which like
They're motivated.
they're motivated to go get that meat, right?
Yep.
Which is pretty great. Like that actually makes ogres really fast. Like
Yep.
it's a pretty fast army now.
It's that big boy move.
Yeah. And they're eating if they're within 3 inches of an enemy. In other words, if they're fighting, because it's assuming all the ogres I saw, at least all the foot ogres. I don't know if they'll put it on like the mounted dudes because we didn't get to see those scrolls. Have an additional attack that's like them eating you, like biting you.
Only.
Yeah, like an ogre bite. That's just like a standard kind of weak attack, but it's an extra attack, right? That they all get.
Sure.
So if they're in combat with you, they are attempting to eat you. And in that case, they get +2 bravery. So they're just, more resilient to running away and stuff.
Because they're eating.
Because they're eating. Yes, they're more interested in sticking around. They're not running away from the feast, is basically how it was explained, which I liked. Here's some other fun facts. There is a Noblar battalion that's all Noblars and scrap launchers.
Go on.
I don't know what it does. It makes the scrap launcher better. They did preview the scrap launcher. It's okay. It's still not great, but it's okay. It depends on the points.
Aww.
Like if the scrap, no, I mean the numbers were fine because it makes like a few attacks at 3/4 no rend D3 damage, right?
Sure.
And so like if it's like 80 points or something or 60 points, maybe it's worth it. If it's just like a Scourge Runner Chariot, I don't know, maybe. But we'll see. But that battalion does exist.
Cool.
And then on the BCR side, the Huskards are now priests and have their own priest lore, like a whole priest prayer table.
Weird. I couldn't have imagined.
Sure. So that's for real. And then obviously this one is going to have enclaves, chambers, temples, whatever. And each of those is keyed to a certain sort of fighting style. So they mentioned that like kind of the generic guts is like, what was it, like the meat fist something or other? I don't know.
Of course it was.
Sure. There's like the underguts, which is the black powder ones that are all about pistols and cannons. There's a one that's all about like hunters and yetis, because hunters got kind of promoted up to be full-on generals now. So like assumingly they got some better rules and their war scroll isn't total trash anymore, but they did get their own list of command traits, as did butchers, the big dudes on the back of the Stonehorns or whatever, and the regular tyrants. So yeah, I think they said there's 5 different of the chambers, might have been 4 or 5. They didn't say exactly. They just named a bunch off, and I didn't catch exactly how many there were. So yeah, there you go. We saw a little bit of the scrolls. I'm not going to deep dive on the scroll because that's more for when we do the Maw Tribe show, right?
Yeah.
But like, there were improvements. Obviously, a lot of this has to do with seeing the thing holistically, understanding the rest of the command traits. What are the new spells? What are the artifacts? It's hard to look at a scroll without any other thing around it and go, oh, it's totally better now. Or it's bad or good, because there's just not enough
points are like
right.
Such a big deal.
Yeah, exactly. What are the points? What's the support? They did mention that like one of the, I think it's that meat fist thing or whatever, has an ability where it buffs your impact hits thing, your trampling charge.
Yeah.
So I assume it adds another 1 to that roll. So now like your big units are doing it on 3s and everybody else is doing it on 5s, right? So yeah, that's kind of cool. Or your big units or your monsters, sorry. We lost Tom's camera while he suddenly goes away to do something else. Okay. That's fine. But yeah, a lot of good, there you go, you're back. A lot of good stuff overall. That's kind of all the facts they really shared there. There was a couple other sort of minor things, but that's I think the big sweep of it. At a high level, the important part is this is not an Auric War Clans build.
Right.
That is to say, it isn't like with Auric War Clans, you had like, this is the Iron Jaws. Turn the page. This is the Bone Splitters. They are completely separate things. And then turn the page. Here's the Big Wa, and that's how you can bring them together. This is much more of a combined, like, Gits type of
Gloom's fight.
experience. Yeah,
Right.
where it's like you can mix and match, and there are obviously power pairs and things that will sort of make sense to go together, right?
Right.
But but it's not two separate things. So realistically, you're going to probably see some fairly integrated forces. Whereas I think with Auric War Clans, you will very often still see like just a Bone Splitter's army and just an Iron Jaws army and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
So most people are probably happy about that. Sorry, hey, whoa, Twitch.
Sure.
So there you go. His prediction seems to be coming true, but time will tell. But if you are an Ogre player and you have like a Legacy Ogre army from before, obviously this is all great news because you probably had a mix of both, of everything, right? But now everything's been brought back together. No more separate Firebelly faction. And there are still those chambers. Some of them lean very heavy, quote unquote, gutbusters and would incentivize, basically making that kind of an army. Whereas some lean very traditional BCR and would encourage making a more traditional BCR army. But you can still, mix it, right?
Yeah, I mean the book feels like here's your book, now be quiet and and go buy some kits.
I mean, look, there is never a reason to complain about getting a book. And
Sure.
like the reality is this is so by the way, last week I had said who worked on the Auric book. Jervis had done the work on the Auric book. So thank you, Jervis. I just wanted to say that because it's a great book that I really love. Sam and Nick Horth, I believe, were the guys who worked on this one. And by all accounts, it looks really cool. They talked a lot. They're clearly very excited for it. You could really tell that they had a great time working on this. And they mentioned that like many people on the design team and in the studio and such have Ogre armies or were building Ogre armies because they were just so, when they got wrapped up in writing this, it was just really exciting and they really loved the lore of it and the story and the attitude, like everything about ogres that is fun and cool and compelling, right? And it got them. And by the way, I think they are a compelling army because of the whole relatively low model count, lots of conversion possibilities, very friendly paint jobs to new painters, right? Because they have very defined like muscle structures. They take well to things like washes and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think they're cool. Most of today's focus was obviously about that. We didn't really get much Bone Daddy information. We've been getting, the trickle of Bone Daddy information. We've seen individual kits.
Well, we've seen
individual unit stats, right?
We've seen their terrain.
Yes, we did see the big terrain piece. Same for the guts, by the way. They do get the maul pot, and the maul pot can sort of like once it's full, and then once you heal everybody, it's empty. I'm sure there's going to be some way to refill it, like a prayer for meat, and like then they get more meat in the stew. And if you're an ogre player and you satisfy the conditions to refill your maul pot, and you don't say "looks like meat's back on the menu, boys," right? If that is not what you say, I understand that's actually like an orc saying that or whatever, an Uruk I guess. But come on now, that's the appropriate thing to say. So anyway,
yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm sure that we could probably think of something better.
I don't know. It seems pretty appropriate. But at any rate, so yeah, that was the news off of that today. I'm sure next week we'll be talking about Bone Daddies and much deeper thing because they'll go through the Bone Daddies book. We got a little bit of news on them, like they have army-wide battle shock. R.I.P. any hope of a Bravery Bomb army ever placing in a tournament. Not that it was very likely, anyways, but take that. You got an army-wide battle shock immunity. So that's a gatekeeper in that regard.
Well, I mean, yes, like I was more interested in the fact that basically they've teased that there's an entirely new mechanic that they operate by that's not command point driven.
Yeah, it's like regiment command or regiment points or something, where each of their regiments have little mini commanders who can issue sub orders or something.
Right. Like every unit has like basically a self-buffing command ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm really interested to see how that ends up panning out.
Yeah. I mean, there's still a lot to see on that army. We've seen a lot of cool stuff. Some of the rules look really neat, but I mean, we really don't have enough background on them yet to talk about them in detail. But a lot more Bone Daddy stuff coming very soon. So, yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, it looks interesting. I'm in. I mean, I'm not in to buy an army, but I'm in. I am. You have my attention.
Right. I can't wait. Like, I'll be very. Yes, I know my dogs are wrestling in the background. I'll be fascinated if they suddenly win you over, Tom. I'm gonna love to live in that world where, like, if they release everything and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I want to do this army, but I don't like this and this and this fig. So what are you gonna do, Tom?
I'll convert it.
Yeah.
The reality is that like I'm not gonna buy their models.
Sure.
like so.
Well, there'd be some I'm sure you like. Some of those.
If I were to do like a Bone Daddy's army, I'm either going to do like a full Tomb King's conversion army,
sure,
or like if I don't go that route, I'll go the full Death Cast Eternals because they're all on the right size bases for like all the big bruisers.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll like convert a bunch of Stormcast. And in either way, I don't buy any of those models.
Sure. I'm sure there are still a few you would probably pick up to be part of it, like just because they are unique and interesting. Like the leader guy, Bone Chad.
Sure, the Kratikos, yeah.
Yeah, and like some of the other, like the Soul Shaper dude, that's a really cool, unique fig. I think he looks awesome. The Soul Shaper, the dude who's like up in the air pulling the soul out of the scythe or whatever. I think that dude looks amazing.
Yeah, like, and it's not that I hate the army. Like, please don't misunderstand me. It's just that like, it's fine. Like, and I'm pretty resolute about not starting a new army this year. Like, I've made it this far.
Sure.
We're in October. I'm painting Night Haunt. Like, this is what I said at the beginning of the year. I was gonna do Night Haunt. Like, I'm sticking to it. Haven't made a new army.
This is me rolling my eyes like very hard, and you can't see it, but they all can.
I can't see that. I can't. But I mean, I haven't. Like, I've stuck to my guns, folks. And despite the deluge of armies, I've held firm.
Sure. And if anybody who's betting on my dogs, if you want to know who's going to be the winner, no, it's this one right here. It's this little one who you can't see at the moment, who's just, you can see like her head. She's just out of frame because that one's mine. She's the leader of the pack here. The other two are one's younger, one's older, but she rules the roost. At any rate, I think they are going to compel a lot of people. Like, I think this army is another one of those things where people are going to see it and really, really love how it all comes together in some way because it'll be interesting. Somebody asked what I think of the fact that, like, those little characters that these little characters who buff hence can't be removed because they're in a unit. They're like the unit champion, right? Yeah. Well, first of all, they could be removed. There are still things that eat them, like Star Drakes and stuff like that will still just bite those dudes right out of the unit. So you better, like, Marathi will stare them to stone, right? And other things. Those kinds of effects become real scary against an army like this. Because if they're really reliant on their champion to empower them, like if they can't use any of their buffs without that champion, look out, right? Because I'm coming for you with those pick a thing out and grab them. Or a giant stuffing them in their pants or, whatever, yeah. Yeah. Because, like, all those guys in your basic units are going to be, like, one wound dudes.
Right.
They're real easy to pick off. Like, the Star Drake's going to eat them and the banner bearer and the musician. Boom, boom, boom. Like, you're just gulp. I hope this unit's still good without that, Yeah, so at any rate, time will tell. All right. What else we got, Tom?
Oh, that's a great question.
We saw their endless spells too. What did you think of their endless spells?
I mean, it's fine.
Sure. I thought they were like fine. Exactly, like the bird was the cool one. It was like, oh, that bird looks kind of cool. I could use him for other things. Like I look at endless spells now, like what's basing material? What's a spell I actually want to use? It goes like this. I look at the endless spells and look at the rules, and I'm like, okay, what's the spells I would use? Shuffle those over here to the side. That's a very small pile, right? And then the rest is like, what can I put onto other figures for conversion? That's tier 2 on this flow chart. And then tier 3 is what's left basing material. Right?
Yeah, like
flow down that chart.
Yeah. Yeah, like I was happy that we got a plastic carrion model. Um,
Yes, there you go. It only took 15 years and the army being canceled, but we got that plastic carrion. There you go. Yes. Score. That is truly a hot take, Tom. That's my favorite take you've ever had on maybe anything ever. So way to go. We got a plastic carrion model.
yeah, like I don't know, like I'm just I may warm to them, but I'm just not there because like let me say it this way. Aesthetically, there's nothing in there that grabs me. If we had went for like full on like Eastern theme, like the samurai on the Lord's base,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been a lot hotter than I am,
Gotcha.
right?
Yeah, they're
But
kind of a mishmash of different
because
aesthetics.
yeah, this like hybrid weird mishmash thing that we are, like it's just it's not as interesting to me. But I never really liked the Morghast models either.
Mm.
So yeah. Yeah, so I mean, and they could have some awesome rules, and if they do, I'll convert some Stormcast journals.
Okay. Cool. You're going full death cast if it happens. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, probably. Like,
That's fine. I feel like this will be your kind of an army. Like being honest, like looking at the 40,000 foot view. You know, I shout out to the artist formerly known as the Lord of Death on Mr. Meff's rantcast because he mentioned that like from everything we've seen at this army, it seems like it'll have a relatively high skill floor, but a really, really high skill ceiling. If it has a lot of that kind of
right,
management of these different interacting elements, right?
right, right.
That's the
There'll be
kind
a
of
lot of
army that
tools.
you like
Yeah.
because you like something that's very skill testing on you and has interesting ways that things can unexpectedly work together, right?
Yep. Yep. I mean, you're not wrong. Like that. That's the whole Johnny. That's a right in my wheelhouse of like interactions. So, yeah. Like I said, like it's interesting, but at the same time, I just got the ultimate toolbox army in Cities of Sigmar, and like I have all the models. So, it's one of those like, and I have a really interesting concept that has arrested me.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Right on. All right, next news piece. We got to talk about the FAQ, Tom. We in all this Bone Daddy and Ogre news, the FAQ dropped. That
Oh,
happened. So, Tom, what grabbed you about the FAQ?
I don't know. I'm still confused. I'm not sure what I read.
Well, there wasn't. Let me say this: there wasn't really much that got changed. It's a lot of cleanup, right?
Sure, sure.
The notable thing that happened, we should mention, of course, is the Hollow Heart thing just didn't get addressed at all. Okay.
Or I mean, there are other abilities that are still confusing to me. Like, there's a couple spells that last forever in the Cities of Sigmar book. Like, until a condition is fulfilled, the spell stays on you forever.
Huikan, you're right, by the way. Your guess is correct. Anyways, continue, Tom.
Um, yeah, so there's just a couple things that didn't go addressed, and yeah, I'm interested to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I mean the Hollow Heart thing standing honestly surprised me. Not that it didn't change, that it wasn't even like in the designer's commentary of like a clarification, right? Of just saying like because
How
it's
does
the
it
kind of
start?
thing that somebody would normally ask and be like, is this just equal to the die roll? Because that's how it seems to read. Does the wounds taken not actually matter? So by de facto, that's how it's written. So I guess yes is the answer now.
No, I mean, we were all just hiding, not hoping that they wouldn't touch it, and we didn't want to bring their attention to it.
It was the most discussed thing on the internet for 2 weeks straight. I'm positive they heard about it. Okay? They made 17 deadly as ever jokes during the stream today. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but they, like, every article has a joke about deadly as ever. They're aware of things that get discussed and memed and joked,
Indeed,
right?
indeed.
So that one surprised me. Like the other thing that surprised me is they didn't block the old Oryx out of the
Yeah,
Big Wa. So like your old boss on Orc on Wyvern or dude on Pig, Those
Or your
guys are
banner
still
bearer.
in. Yeah, your banner bearer guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that as well, and I was it was curious. And actually, like they clarified how the banner interacts, like in the
Yeah.
commentary. So like
Not only
they
did they not remove it, they
yeah.
answered it. Like, yeah, it still works. This is how it works. Okay. I guess. Thanks. It's fine.
So that happened. And then obviously the one that I was kind of teasing about that it's frustrating, but it's the reality that we live in, is they included a very like ambiguously worded statement about like the latter publication.
I don't think that was ambiguously. You're talking about the clarification that just came out there?
Yeah, like
What was ambiguous about that? So let me hold on.
see,
Let's set the
yeah,
stage. Pause.
yep, yep.
As we mentioned on the show either last week or 2 weeks ago, right? There is a standing FAQ that they had answered back to the original General's Handbook 19 FAQ.
But it's not in the book anymore. That has
I understand that got removed. I understand, but what it was it was a thing that said, do units that don't have pitched battle profiles in GHB 19, can they be used? Basically, right?
Yeah,
I'm
and
paraphrasing.
That's what I made a joke about.
Right,
yes.
And the original answer was just no. Like, okay, great, who cares, right?
Right.
And so that got removed, and the answer got the question didn't really get removed. It's basically so they kind of reformatted the question a little and then changed the answer to yes. And so it was, can units that don't have
I have it.
Sure, bring up the exact text.
Yeah.
By all means, thank you. Let's not paraphrase. Okay, thank you. If a pitched battle profile has a later publication date than the latest General's Handbook, but its pitched battle profile is not included in the latest General's Handbook, can it be used in a pitched battle? The answer is yes. What's not clear? Maybe I'm just missing it. Help me out. What's not clear about that?
If a pitched battle profile has a later publication date than the latest General's Handbook, okay.
Yep.
So if you were interpreting it like sooner rather than later, okay. So later publication would imply in this reading, which I don't agree with, it's not necessarily the most natural.
Oh,
but
I can't wait for this. This is going to be some gymnastics. I'm ready.
Yeah. So
okay.
Instead of where it says later, right? Say earlier, because it is not sooner. It is later. Like, so it's farther away, right?
No.
Well,
later publication date means after the General's Handbook.
But
that is the English reading of that sentence. You can't take the word out of context and say it also has this different annotation.
I agree with that, but then it should be redundant because of course it's not like then the question itself seems redundant because it says if a pitched battle profile has a later publication date than the latest General's Handbook, but it's not included. Well, of course it's not included because it's a later publication.
That's just so you're arguing with the clarifying text?
Yeah, like yes, like it. What you're suggesting it or what that reading suggests is that reading it that way, the statement that like the clarification of what it's trying to specify is completely nonsensical because if it's published later, of course it's not going to be in the General's Handbook.
Again, that is some forest for the trees stuff. Okay.
I'm just saying, and I've seen people argue that way as well. I don't think that like your clarification is how I clarified it on Twitter when I was asked.
Yeah,
I agree with you. That said, I've seen people pushing hard to say this is talking about compendium scrolls that were like not included, that were published at an earlier date.
To me, this is a simple answer to the previous thing. So if something comes out in White Dwarf or a new unit shows up in a later book or whatever,
yep,
they are now legal. Yep. Problem solved. You have to purposefully be obtuse to read this wrong.
I mean, I'm not going to say that because I have seen people like very intentionally confused as to what this means. Now, I'm not going to cast aspersions at their ability to read like you are, Vince.
Sure.
But
I am, because it's clear as a bell. I'm telling you right now. Here you go. Here's what it means. If something is published after the General's Handbook, and has a pitched battle profile, can it be used? Yes. There you go. Until we publish the next General's Handbook. And then this cycle starts all over again because that's what sets pitched battle legality.
Yep.
Now, I understand this means that things like Mr. Mortality Glass and unfortunately probably the Fire Slayers Battalion that was published a day before the GHB or whatever nonsense, by the hard reading, those are now illegal.
Well, not only are they illegal,
Okay.
what this does is that this sets a precedent for how they are going to move forward. And that's a really important, like, part of my frustration wasn't just their stupid answer that did not.
It didn't actually answer anything. Yeah.
It made future things illegal.
Right.
Well,
it was so plainly wrong, no one even read it or used it. Yeah.
Right. So, but beyond that, my
thank you, Skeleton.
here,
I appreciate Skeleton Flower's comment that English isn't his first language, and he thinks it seems pretty clear. A+ to Skeleton.
Indeed. But so my challenge here, what this communicates is that anything that is published always has a chance to disappear within a year.
Sure. No, you're right. Go back to your face, by the way. We got it. We don't need this text anymore.
Oh, sorry.
You're fine.
Yeah,
I mean, here's what I'll say. No, there is a deeper conversation to be had here, right?
Right. And that's what my critique was about, which is that, like, you can buy things with a year expiration date now.
Sure.
Because if they don't get included in the next GHB, they are immediately illegal.
Right. Totally.
So, like the Selesky Battalion, I know that people are super excited that it's legal now, according to this FAQ, but this means it's illegal until next summer. And if it doesn't get rolled in the GHB, it becomes illegal.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So, like, all of this stuff is on a clock now.
Yes, and that's my point. Like, the deeper conversation that needs to be had here is not, oh my God, the roof is on fire.
Indeed.
Right? The conversation that needs to be had is, how are we going to legitimately handle this stuff? What are the expectations we as a community have, and what expectations is GW going to set to that regard, right? So, people from GW, if you happen to watch this, hi, well done on all the last books. Good to see you. This is a thing that I would put some internal focus on and think about publishing an article about. This would be a great pull back the, open the kimono kind of conversation, right?
This is what our intention is.
This is what our intention is, and this is how we think of this stuff. Yep. We don't want to make your toys not be usable. Like, almost everything they do and have been doing over this year has been, really, we want you to use more of your toys, right? They've been trying to catch up books. We've been on this hurry up offense with using more books, right? And, so either stop putting pitched battle rules in White Dwarf completely if you're going to X them out in a year, which, by the way, I'm fine with. That's okay.
Right.
They can do that.
Right. Like, we hadn't had that forever anyways. So, like, if that's your intention, just don't put them in there at all.
Or make the formal distinction between, and 2+ Tough just mentioned this, and I actually agree with this a lot. Make the same distinction they made at Nova, right? Of, there's a difference between pitched battle legal and competitive legal. Okay. Yep. Where, like, this thing can be used in pitched battles because it has pitched battle profiles and it's got points and whatever, right? But that FAQ that you put up sort of is agnostic about that very distinction that they talked about with the Legend Scrolls. Right.
But these are not intended for competitive play.
Right. And so you just have to be considerate of things like, well, what does this mean for new players? If you publish sort of usable tournament rules in a White Dwarf, and they don't, we've mentioned this many times, and then that's it. That's the only place they exist.
Oh, by the way,
somebody comes in 4 months from now, they're not getting that White Dwarf and have no idea what you're talking about when they show up to roll at a game with you, whether at a tournament or your local store, or they walk into your basement and go, hey, I'm going to play these rules. And you're like, what? What rules? Never heard of it.
I need to issue a retraction, or at least an acknowledgement. I had said, like, hey, GW, why don't you publish the White Dwarfs digitally? Do you remember this? That started in June.
Oh, neat. Okay, cool.
Like, so you can go and buy the PDF of a White Dwarf for $7.99 or whatever right now, since June.
Nice.
Which is even more egregious regarding the Fire Slayers.
Sure, no, that's fine. But the point is, what I'd really rather, if they're going to continue to put pitched battle stuff in there, then I fall back to my previous discussion that I've said many times, and I'll keep saying it until it happens, which is this stuff should become available after 3 months in the download section on Warhammer Community. It can't take up that much space. You already have the page layouts done. Publish them into a PDF and put them on Warhammer Community. It's the simplest fix, right?
I got a better one.
Okay.
Just put them in the app.
No, I mean, that's fine. They can be in the app too. But I'm saying, like, at minimum, I'm talking minimal amount of effort, right? Like, I'm assuming that they are strapped to the gills over there and nobody has free time, which is highly possible. They're really working hard.
Sure.
And I respect that. I know what it means when you're working hard toward a, and there's a 2-pound shot and a 1-pound cannon. I get it. Okay. This is the simplest answer. You have the files in InDesign. They're already laid out. Pull out page X through Y, export to PDF, upload. Okay? Like, I know you can do this. I've published books, and in publishing books, I removed sections and published them to my website for previews. Okay? You can do it. It's very easy. So, like, whatever. That's a low bar. I'm setting the lowest bar. Do more, you make me happier, but that's it. That is a bar near the floor. Okay? At any rate.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's my feelings on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So good. Time will tell. There you go. Hopefully we see some discussion on that. Because it's just a positive thing. They can have a nice discussion on it, and we can go. There you go.
Yeah.
So, cool. I want to talk about hashtag ban Slaanesh. That's what I want to talk about. That's our next news item.
Can I just not talk about Slaanesh anymore? I'm just not interested.
No, this is every show. Every show, apparently. We have to talk about Slaanesh some. You don't have to talk at all, Tom. Okay? I'm going to take a little drink here. Because I got to wet my whistle for this one. This might go for a while, folks. Settle in. All right, here we go. Okay. So let's talk about hashtag ban Slaanesh. So on Monday, Rob of The Honest Wargamer put out a hot take tweet saying that his belief is that the current move that TOs should take with Slaanesh is to simply ban it from tournaments. Okay? And his reasoning for this was twofold. I'm sure it was manyfold, but two primary reasons. One, in 40K, they recently put out this Iron Hands expansion, and it was broke. Okay? It was just super broken. Like, it won 80% of the tournaments the weekend after it was published or something. Like, it was out of this world. And Frontline Gaming, who runs ITC, if I say anything wrong here, I apologize. I don't know the 40K tournament scene very well. Basically said, we're not going to allow this rule set. We're banning this rule set. And GW said okay and put out, sort of an FAQ and fixed it in a very rapid fashion, right? Okay, so basically, ITC made this strong move, and then GW responded and fixed it, and basically it's better-ish now. I don't know how better it is because I can't judge, but a fix was made of some kind. Okay, and so secondly, Slaanesh is currently the only army because we also the stat show is back. LLV and the stats are back, so great. Hard-working LLV, he's back in the mix. I don't know if you got a chance, Tom, to watch the stat show at all, but it was real good.
I have not yet. I have not. I'm very anxious to watch it.
It was real good. A lot of cool stats. And here's one of the, I'm going to pause here for just a second to say, biggest headline, the number of events seem to basically double. Some of that's probably just more tracking and more reporting, but some of that is just a lot more events over the same time frame last year. And the meta, like when you take out Slaanesh, remember that fat middle we've talked about? It's actually really happening. Most armies are falling between 40 and 60%, with a pretty good number in the 45 to 55 range or in that kind of area. I mean, there's obviously a couple outliers that don't have books, like Slaves to Darkness. I think are down at like 10%. It's just horrible. But like that's stuff that's not real, as it were, right? Like, no offense to the STD players, but like who's playing straight Slaves to Darkness and not playing like Slaves to Darkness as Slaanesh or Tzeentch or something, right? Because those will all get counted in them. The only time you get in Slaves to Darkness if you truly play them is like Undivided right now. Anyway, so the fat middle is existing. The meta is actually very healthy, but then there's this outlier Slaanesh, and that was Rob's secondary reason, which was Slaanesh's, let's call it tilde, a 70% win rate. So there's some events not counted. It's probably higher if you pull out the mirror matches where like in a mirror match, it automatically knocks the win percentage to 50, right? Because one has to win, one has to lose, right?
Yep.
Okay. So it automatically drags the number down. It's probably in the 70s if you remove mirror matches and things like that, if you go through and clean up the statistics. And so what Rob advocated was TO should ban Slaanesh as like this sign of look, this is really a problem, and basically get GW to fix Slaanesh. Okay? Okay. So that's sort of the idea. All right. So so obviously I've been a long time defender of Slaanesh. Okay? But here's what I'll say. The numbers to some extent do not lie. Okay? And like they're clearly very strong, whether in the current meta.
Go on.
Sure.
You have my attention.
Okay, did I turn you around here? Whether
You did.
in the current meta or because of their actual rules being broken or because of their summoning being too strong, I don't care what it is. For whatever reason, they are performing exceptionally well above the curve, right?
Yep.
However, the idea that we should engage in this sort of like top-down control, what Rob is simultaneously advocating for two things I don't like. So, Rob, I disagree with hashtag ban Slaanesh, and here's why. But I don't disagree with your principle, and I'll explain how I square those two. One, you're advocating for a top-down control. Go to all the TOs, get them to do this thing, and take the power away from the players. That only stands to injure TOs who piss people off and injure players who don't get to play armies that they've spent potentially, hundreds of hours laboring on and really have a deep love for. No one wins there. I understand you're saying, let's all take this pain and so we can achieve this greater good, but that's the wrong way to go about it, right? Appealing for other people to remove your fun, players will never like that, okay? It's just not the right way to do it. I get it that it's like a power play, but no, I'm not willing to engage in effectively Warhammer terrorism, right? Terrorism is when you strike out, you try to make a big, bold move that'll gain a lot of attention because there's a power imbalance between you and the people you're trying to strike terror into. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm just describing that's how terrorism works, right?
Sure.
And that's what this is. The feeling is we as the community don't have the power to get them to change this. There's a power imbalance. So we've got to engage in this big strike, right? That just like draws a bunch of attention and makes them react. All right. So I don't think that's the right answer. And yes, I'm being hyperbolic for everybody. Of course I'm being hyperbolic. Don't take it too seriously here, folks. But at the same time, I also don't like the idea of handing X number of people who are running tournaments the potential to lose people coming to their tournaments, to building anger amongst the community and resentment, and to taking a choice away from players. So here's my actual answer. Okay? If you really believe this, then and here's what I think. I had this solidifying in my mind this last weekend when I sat down to play a game with my group. I had, my normal friends come over to play a game, and we were all thinking about what armies we wanted to play. And I was like, there's no way I want to play my Slaanesh. It won't be fun for them.
Sure.
Right? And that struck me very hard, right? That like, wow, the people who I play with will not have a fun time. They wouldn't stop playing, in the game. They wouldn't have like turned around and been like, well, we're not going to hang out with you anymore or something like that. These are lifelong friends, right? But it would have just been a bad time for them.
Right.
So instead, I got out Iron Jaws and we had a dandy old time. And everybody had a good time, right? Yep. It was actually a really fun game because we did a team of Iron Jaws and Khorne against two cities armies that were both focused on shooting, which was a great matchup, right? It was super fun. No, Doom, that is not what I just said. But that was a very stark realization for me, right? Of regardless of what I think that they can be played against, because I've seen people play against me and beat me, right? And I know I was playing this army at least competently. It doesn't matter Because if it's not a fun play experience, it's not a fun play experience. And ultimately, I don't care about the tournament scene or tournament win percentages. I don't care. Not at all. Because that is whatever it is. Look, if you go to a tournament, you know what you're taking. You're entering a semi-competitive environment. If you're going to win, if you're one of the 10 people who go to a tournament with your eye on the prize of taking first place, right?
You have the ability to do that.
Then you knew what the meta was, and you know how to counter it. You're like the most competitive player around, right? So you should be able to handle outliers and understand what the meta looks like. You are the most equipped person to deal with it. And like, yeah, if you face it and it sucks, I'm sorry. Okay? That's competition sometimes. What I'm concerned with is everybody else. Everybody else who's at that tournament who isn't aiming for the top and who has a bad game. Everybody else in their local game who's going to a shop and having a terrible time and having a not fun, not interactive thing, which is what the army will simply encourage. Like, that is just a fact, right? The way the army plays is a pretty non-interactive experience. That is absolutely true. Okay? So here's my solution. I'm not going to play my Slaanesh army. And I would encourage you, if you're a competitive player, if you consider yourself a competitive player, and you have a Slaanesh army, put them on the shelf, like me. Okay? If you want to still run your Slaanesh, do what I saw some people doing in the Slaanesh chat, which is making like an all-mortal force. Right? Like making it all out of Chaos Warriors and Chaos Knights and Chariots. Cool. No Keepers of Secrets, right? Stuff like that. That seems well more fair, right? By the way, I'm not telling you you have to do this or you should do this. I'm inviting you to join me in this. Nothing more, nothing less. You're not a bad person if you keep playing your well-tuned army. You do you. What I can say is, I'm sure in most cases, I probably spent more time painting my army than you did. I probably have owned my army longer than you did, right? And it's hard to judge your aesthetic love of the thing, but Slaanesh is in my soul, so we're at least on equal footing there, if this is your army of choice. So what I'm saying is I understand your pain, okay? And it sucks. It sucks if to put it up on the shelf. But it's the right answer. Because if we, who are competitively minded, just make the choice on our own and say, we're not going to play them until this gets fixed, that makes a statement. Now, if you still want to take them, I'm not judging you. You play what you play. The rules are the rules. It's all legal. There's absolutely zero judgment. You're not a bad person. You're not doing a bad thing. Okay?
This is what a lot of doc players last year did this, by the way. I don't know if you guys know that or not.
100%. 100%.
Like if you'll remember, if you'll go back in the stats, you'll actually see a number of the doc wins dried up, and it wasn't because they stopped being good, but it dried up for a variety of reasons. Part of which is that I know in the doc chat, a lot of the doc players just felt bad and were bored, and so so the answer was they shelved it or played non-optimal lists.
Yeah, if you're a competitive player, if you really think you're a competitive player, if you really think you've got chops, now I'll turn to the slightly jokey part, but it's also somewhat serious. If you're really a competitive player, prove it. Prove it. Don't take the easy road, okay? You know what Slaanesh is capable of. You've seen how it acts in the current meta. Win with something that is more challenging. Reliant is questioning your stats. There was a drop in the meta percentage, Reliant. I'll say that much for sure over that time period. But why? Who knows? Who the exact players? Who knows? The meta percentage did drop. That did happen in LV stats. But sure. I also agree. I'm sure there's plenty of people who kept it. And by the way, I would expect the same thing to happen here. This isn't a thing about judgment. This isn't a thing about that. I don't want anybody to have the feel bads. What I want is for the maximum amount of us to enjoy their games that we can. And we have to take some responsibility for our own community. So this is my way of saying it. Now, look, in less than a week, I'm taking 1,000 points in my Slaanesh to a tournament. Okay,
that was my very next question. No.
Because I don't have a choice.
I do a different army.
No, I built this army for that tournament. It's a team tournament. You and I built a board, built a narrative, built everything for this thing. Okay. I was already committed to taking them. And I actually reached out to the TO to discuss this. All right. And he even said, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine to bring it, right? And
what if you like, here you go, Vince, you only ever summon one thing per turn?
I mean, I don't know if I'm, whatever. I can figure out what I want to do with that. But the point is that, like, yes, I'm still taking that to that tournament because I already committed to doing it. It's the list. I built a display board. I spent months literally building it for this one tournament that I biz. This is what I build my army for. Tom and I get together in March. We each plot out 1,000-point force, and we build an army over the intervening 6 to 8 months, whatever, literally for this tournament. We do it every year. It's something I really enjoy. But I'm not playing in any games. I'm not taking it to any future tournaments until this gets fixed. You can think I'm hypocritical for doing that one thing, but I'm going to be honest about it, okay? You know, that's the reality of the thing. Okay? And if you have some tournament that you've already committed to and you built all this stuff, I get it too. That's what I'm saying. But there you go. Okay? So I invite you to take a different force. If I had a second display board and a second force, I would take it. But I built all this to be with Tom to go to our army.
I mean, you could do Iron Jaws, and I could take a city's army, a dwarf city's army.
We could talk about it. I'm not opposed to it. Honestly, part of it is I'm not. I really wanted Steve to see this army. Like, I'm proud of it aesthetically, and this is a hobby-focused tournament. And, like, I've spent a lot of years on, or a lot of time on the hobby.
I do want to take my Night Haunt. I'm not going to lie.
Sure.
Like, I've spent all this time on it. Yeah.
And I get that. That's painful, right? But I'm not going, like, there are other tournaments coming up I'm going to. I'm not taking them. Okay? Yeah. I did take them off the table for this. And, but if you want to keep playing them, keep playing them. But I invite you to join me and challenge you if you're competitive to do so. That takes time. Sometimes you've got to get a different army. I get it. If it's the only thing you've got in the rotation, or it's the thing you really love, or it's what lights the fire in your engine, then play it and feel good about it. But I would ask GW to make some corrections because it is creating a negative play experience. So there you go. That's my response to hashtag ban Slaanesh, right? And that's how I genuinely feel about it. I hope you don't think I'm a bad person for saying this, but that's what it is, right? I welcome your comments, your thoughts, your feedback. I don't think banning is the right answer. I think it only creates feel-bads across the board, and I'm not willing to engage in that kind of like strong-arming to get our way, because a lot of people would get hurt by that who have no knowledge or interest in this movement of what's going on. And I'm not interested in
comp. It's hard to implement. Like, yeah, it's hard to implement some type of comp across the board that is going to be not only like, that's not also going to generate feel-bads, especially for players who are completely oblivious to the conversation that's going on. And then rolling up to an event and be like, why is this way?
The last demon in Pandora's box was hope. And that is what doomed the world, okay? Like, opening the Pandora's box of comp is the hope that you will just, we'll do better. Okay, then it's just going to lead to a bunch of messy mess, which is what it was before, back in the old days where we had this stuff all over the place. So I don't want to go down that road. I have no interest in it. I like that we all have a relatively even playing field. It's an advantage that we all use the same language and have the same game verbiage and basically the same game stuff. But yes, thank you. Rerolling Ones Jack said hashtag shelve Slaanesh. I like it, Jack. I like it a lot. That's the hashtag. Shelve your Slaanesh. Absolutely. Shelve Slaanesh. That's the right answer. If you as a player are willing to do it, then do what I did. I'm not going to be playing them in any of my games with my friends. I took them off the table for all my future tournaments next year. That's not what I... So, there you go.
So, you're saying put Slaanesh back in the prison.
Yeah, look, they want to be... Here's what I'll say. If you've still got problems about this with the emotion of your army, Slaanesh likes it when they've got to wait anyways, right? It's delayed pleasure, which is what Slaanesh is all about. So, there you go. Really, it's a good response, Rillian. It's a good response. But there you go. So, okay. We done with that one? Is that a good enough conversation on that?
I mean, are you done?
I'm done.
As I said, I don't want to talk about Slaanesh.
It's fair enough. Well, hopefully because of this, we won't have to talk about them anymore for a while. All right. But we'll see. I mean, hopefully the next time we have to talk about them is when the rules get adjusted. And then we'll be like, yay, things got fixed. So, and everybody can be happy. Great. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Great. All right, Tom. Well, that was a very long news / other current events section. So, Tom, I want to get to the pick of the week, and I want you to start us off because this is a similarly important issue that I really want to get people's attention on.
The pick of the week?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, friend of the show, Scrubby and Wells, Tyler Emerson, announced on Facebook today that he is selling a number of things.
I mean, basically everything.
Right. He's basically liquidating his hobby stuff for Warhammer, not necessarily because he was passionate about wanting to get rid of all of it, but just simply there's some personal stuff that needs to be dealt with, and so he's selling his stuff to kind of recoup some costs. And so we're going to share his Twitter, and I want to encourage you to go look at the list of stuff that's on sale. It's a Google Doc, and help a brother out. So he has a lot of stuff for sale. He's a good dude. It's painted wonderfully. Check it out. Now,
let me make a quick note about that. Painted wonderfully. Almost all of his stuff was commission painted by really high-end commission painters who, like, this wasn't a rush job. His army is, both of his armies, everything he's done is that he's had commissioned is gorgeous. So, like, if you are looking to pick stuff up and want really beautiful figs, it is a worthwhile investment. This isn't quote-unquote pro-painted off of eBay, right? Like, this is really beautiful stuff for the army.
This is like display case stuff.
A lot of it is, yes. Not everything, but a lot of it is. All of it is very high tabletop at minimum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, that's the first thing I would say is go check it out, find something, and buy it. Now, if you're like me and have shelves full of stuff,
right,
and you're like, man, I would just love to buy more stuff, and I'd love to help a brother out, but I just don't have room for this stuff. I would encourage you to be like, a lot of people on that Twitter thread who have decided to buy things from Tyler and send him the money for those things, but just tell him, you know what, Tyler, I need you to hold on to that for a couple of years. Or, Tyler, I need you to hold on that indefinitely for me.
Yep.
I can't store it here.
I agree.
So I want to exhort you all to go find something and help a brother out.
Yep. If you feel that you've got the means to do that, reach out and buy a thing from Tyler for Tyler. Buy him back a Tree Lord or something, or a unit of Liberators, or whatever it is. And a lot of people have said that where they're like, well, I'll buy this thing, but you keep it. I want you to have this thing. I'm now going to re-gift it back to you or whatever.
The best was like Ben Johnson, who's like, I'm going to buy your core rule book, but I'm going to need you to hold on to it for a couple years and read it every week for me.
Right. Yeah. So either way, if you want to pick up the stuff, he is selling it. You can just literally buy it, and that's fine. That's a good investment. It's quality stuff. But if you want to go that route too, Tyler is obviously one of the nicest, most genuine, honest, fantastic people I have met in this hobby. I consider him a true friend. At almost every tournament I've gone to that he's in, he has called me on the road both to and from, and we've spent probably 3 or 4 hours just talking Warhammer and life. And he is just an amazing human being, and anything we can do to help him. He is one of the really good people in life.
For those that have asked about a GoFundMe, I am not promoting a GoFundMe simply because he is very explicitly asked not to.
Right. So this is our workaround.
Yeah. He has. Let's be clear. He is very clearly asked to not do a GoFundMe, and so I'm saying, that's fine, Tyler. We will honor your wishes and not do a GoFundMe. So instead, everybody just buy his stuff, send the money to him, and then tell him to keep it.
Right. That's the easy way. We get sneaky with it.
Right.
So we're gonna trick him into this GoFundMe.
I'm gonna follow the rules.
Right. He said very clearly he didn't want to go that direction. Okay, fine.
And so I'm gonna encourage everybody to go buy something from him. and then just have him not ship it to him.
There you go. My pick of the week. We mentioned it a few times already, but I'll formally put the link down there. The Stat Show is back. It was a lot of fun stuff. And it like most of it was very good news. That's what I will say. Like it's pretty actually awesome to see how even a lot of the meta is, how much the tournaments are growing, how many people are giving results into LV. So it was fantastic. So I'll link that down there below. Very worthwhile watch. Big giant thank you to LV. I don't think he's watching right now, but if he is, thank you very much. If you're watching in the future, thank you, buddy, for doing all this hard work, and to Rob for hosting it and doing the show. I think it's wonderful, and it celebrates a lot of great things that are clearly going on as AOS is just it's building. We're getting more events. We're getting a better, more competitive meta, and I hope we just continue to see that grow. So there you go. We're about to have 4 books flood into the meta, so we'll see how that works out.
Like, I have no idea what this is even going to look like to stabilize.
Oh, yeah. We've got months until we know what this all looks like. Yes. Because we're getting 4 books. We're getting a rapid infusion into the meta here real fast. So things are going to get, as Elvis would say, all shook up. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Like, it's just crazy. Like, it's just, I don't know how anybody can even pretend to predict what the actual meta is going to look like when all this is done. So that's what I'm going to say.
Yep. All right. So let's talk to some hobby time. Tom, you got that army done yet? We got like 2 weeks until this tournament.
Yep. I've posted some glimpses of it earlier, and I finished my last model tonight, as we started the show. So I got my my Purple Sun done. See? Purple Sun.
He's scary. Yes.
He is scary. Yeah.
I can't wait for that to rebound on me and kill my own people.
It's going to be so great. It's just some Hellstriders or whatever. You'll be fine. You have like 6 models in your army.
It's true. I have 14 models in that army. That's not a lie.
I mean, am I wrong?
No, I have 14 models.
1,000 points, 14 models.
Yeah.
So the Night Haunter done. I posted a brief comment on Twitter about them. I mean, they're not done, but they're like tournament done. I'll probably try to get some army photos up in the next, like, full, army photos at some point. I don't know when. But yeah, it's really come together. I'm real stoked. And in fact, like, I've already laid out my stuff for my Adepticon. So the next big push, ironically, is my team's event for Adepticon.
Right.
My next big hobby push. I don't know that we're ready to announce who our 4-person team is, but it's so hot.
It's going to be exciting.
It's so hot.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
It's so hot right now.
It is so hot right now. So it's going to be an amazing event, and I'm looking forward to rocking the team's event at A-Kon this year with my teammates.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm sad I don't get to play in this, but
I am sad as well.
Yeah.
We would have loved to add you, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm really happy with our 4th.
No, I understand. You definitely upgraded, but that's okay.
So,
by the way, the Purple Sun. Somebody said, "What sound does the Purple Sun make?" It makes the same sound as the little ghoul at the end of like Buffy from that production. So it's like grr, arg. That's the sound it makes. Yeah, that's what it does. It goes across.
That's legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
That's legitimate.
Yeah. For myself and my hobby time, I am finishing up this guy. Tom obviously can't see it, but this is my steam tank commander with his thermal rider cloak and his flying steam tank. He's mostly painted. There's some finishing work and a lot of weathering and stuff to do on him. His base is back behind me, but he'll be flying kind of at an angle over some terrain. So that's my steam tank commander for my Tempest Eye army for Whirlwind's Edge. The general on Griffin is back there. We'll see some of this stuff tonight when we look at conversions. Speaking of conversions, is a good segue because I am so excited for this army. Like, I finished up my gyrocopter which I shared out there. It's up there. And I'm loving everything about this army and making it's every piece being a bespoke conversion from just stuff is like so much fun. So yeah, flying steam tank, and I know what the walking steam tanks are going to be because I'm going to do 2 more of those, which will be good. You know, everybody should have 7 steam tanks. I think that's almost to the right number.
You really have like a problem. Um,
You just cotton on to this now?
yeah, like I mean, I don't know how I didn't catch it before, but
Sure. Well, I keep it so well hidden. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, but it's a good transition into conversions because this army that I'm working on is a completely converted army, right?
yeah, yeah,
And as well, so is your current army.
yeah.
So I thought we'd start. We've got some photos queued up of some of our favorite conversions we've done over the time, and I'll kind of bring those up and down as we go. But I wanted to start by just kind of saying, like, let's talk about the why. Okay.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So why do conversions? Because I think almost every army I've done has featured some conversions, but some of them are pretty minimal, right? Like I'll often do some head swaps if I like certain heads better, or weapon swaps if I like the look of certain weapons better, or something like that, right? Like my Daughters of Cain were pretty straight, but I didn't use any of the mask heads for like the sisters. I used all witch elf heads and all, you know,
Right.
that kind of thing, right? That's a super minimal conversion, right? That's just like that is as minimal as it gets because I liked the look. But why do you convert? Like, why even do it?
I found it's really interesting. I found that I am not interested in an army. Like I have no buy-in until I have like a concept. And like I actually struggled with this really hard with my daughter's army. Like I didn't realize it was going to be a thing. So like when I did like to jump back. So when I first did my like goblin army, like so let me say it this way. I did my high elves. That was my first thing that I started painting. And like I was just super lethargic on that. Like I was doing everything stock and it was just I didn't make progress.
Also, because high elves are naturally boring and awful.
Stop it. There were lots of detail, but in general, like I wanted him to look like the high elves, and I did that, but I wasn't able to make it like deep into the army. And then I did my goblins, my forest goblins, and like I blew through a bunch of models, but it was all converted. So all of it was like personalized, all of it was like handcrafted, and it was just it was a project, it was a labor of love. And then I went on to my Nurgle army, and I got my Nurgle army done, and I had some pretty significant conversions in there. But in general, a lot of it was stock. But so I lost interest.
Right.
Like a lot of stuff that I still have to paint, like it's just like stock stuff. And then I did my big KO project, my big KO dwarf project, and I just painted like all of the models, like all the everything. My Fire Slayer, so all of my KO stuff was converted. All of my Fire Slayers were fairly stock, and I petered out on the Fire Slayer army again. Like a lot of it's like semi-painted on the shelf or like partially painted. And then I'm on to this Night Haunt. Like, so when I was starting my current project, I say all that to say, like, I notice I lose momentum and I'm not as interested in projects when it's not like handcrafted converted.
Mm-hmm.
And with my Night Haunt, like I was dragging my feet and was just so uninterested in them. Until I realized like the hook, which was the Death Elves, like Druchii, like wanting to tie that in and bring that like concept to life. And so as soon as like, and maybe for me, it's like when I feel like I have something to add,
Yeah.
to the hobby world, I have motivation.
Yep.
So like with the KO, like I wanted to get it out there because I wanted to give birth to this vision, and I was motivated to do that. And like the same thing with my goblins, and the same thing with these Night Haunt is that like I have a vision of like what I want this army to be and how I want it to function and the aesthetic that I want to carry into my out of the death stuff and into my the city like armies associated with it and stuff like that. So like a lot of it has to do with motivation and passion and like birthing a vision that's original.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
No, I agree. There's a pretty famous like behavioral economics experiment where they sort of had a group of college students assemble little Lego men, and they were
Yep.
like, "We'll pay you a quarter per Lego men, and you can just do it as long as you want, right? And we'll keep paying you." And or some, maybe it's a nickel per Lego man, doesn't matter. Some amount of money per Lego man, right? Maybe it's 5 cents. Colleges don't have a lot of money. And then they said, but we're going to take them all apart later. And what they found in the experiment was that if they disassembled the Lego men in front of the people, like if it was literally like person assembles the Lego man, gets their payment, and then the interviewer, the conductor of the experiment, then just took the Lego man apart right in front of them, they assembled a lot less. Okay? Even though it's a stock Lego man and there's nothing about it, humans naturally attach a lot of we invest a lot of psychological utility into things we create ourselves, right? It's one of the key fundamentals of this hobby and why like you're never going to have pre-painted GW miniatures, because assembling your miniature and painting your miniature invests you in the hobby and in the miniature, right? It's yours. That's your thing. You did it. You assembled it. You painted it. You own it. It has a higher value to you than anyone else's miniature in the world, even though it's exactly the same thing, right? So there, when you then convert it, it adds an extra layer on top of that, right? Because it's not like everybody else's Sequitur or everybody else's Hex Wraith or whatever, right?
Yep.
And so I think it does do that. At the same time, I think that's sort of the kind of the semi-subconscious motivation aspect of it, right? At the same time, I think you hit on like the realization that you get an idea and you want to realize something, right? Like when you have a vision. And I think certain armies are more suited to this than others. Like Cities is one of those books that's super suited to this, right? Where you can just run off in a direction and you can make this thing your own. You can tell your own story. You can truly like form these units into something that fits a different vision you had of them. You know, my Tempest Eye army here, this Whirlwind's Edge, the city I made, I thought of the whole narrative for the city, how it existed, how it ran, what it was like. And then that was like, okay, well then that's what all these units are going to be. They're these heavily machine-driven units. It's all mechanical, right? And all this like sort of group of this city of scientists and alchemists and inventors, right, who run on this eternal power they have with this static whirlwind that blows around their city at all points in time, right?
Yep.
And so the being able to then bring that to life has just been like a lot of fun. Tom has to go deal with a child, I suspect. So I'll talk for a little more. Yeah, and I think Skeleton brought up a good point in the comments that I will address. I don't think there's anything wrong with going all in the model straight. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The first Keeper of Secrets I did, you can insert any other model here, whatever. I assembled it straight because it, to me, was so aesthetically pleasing and beautiful and wonderful and perfect. It was perfection. It was what I had wanted for all of my hobby life, like since I first picked up the army in 2006. And so I didn't feel I needed to convert it. But when I did the later ones, I started converting them, right? Because I have multiple keepers, and I started converting them because it was more fun. And that's generally the true there. Like the first Gorgon I ever assembled, I did him straight up out of the kit because I thought it was fun. But then later I just started like randomly converting, you know, because it was more fun to do so. Same with rat ogres and everything else. And we'll see a bunch of examples when we look at some photos. In fact, while Tom is waiting, let's look at some photos, shall we? Let's do that, team. How's that sound? I'm going to bring up, well, this is one of Tom's photos of one of his converted things, but since Tom's not here, we'll skip past his stuff. There we go. We'll skip past all Tom's stuff for a moment because I don't want to talk about Tom's stuff without it. So, like, things like this. Like, when I got the Archaon kit, I was in the middle of a Tzeentch army. Tom, you have a picture over your face now on the screen because I brought this up to give an example of what I was talking about. And so I had this Tzeentch army, and I knew I wanted Archaon to lead it. But I didn't want it to be just like standard Archaon. I wanted it to be a Tzeentch Archaon. And Tzeentch famously had the multi-headed dragon. And so I was like, okay, so I got this vision of what Archaon sort of in his Tzeentchian aspect would look like, right? And so I started chopping up the Archaon kit. And adding dragon heads, and, you know, he has the Stormcast head like all of my Tzeentch Knights do, because I argue still and to this day, and always will, that the Stormcast Death Mask would look, it just looks way better on way better on Tzeentch mortals than it does on Stormcast. It just feels like an emotionless, that kind of like emotionless metal mask. That's so Tzeentch, right? Where like it's all cold logic and calculation and math and stuff, right? And so anyway, this was like, and I loved this conversion. I was so proud of it and happy with it for how it came out, because it was a huge amount of time and effort. For a time, like this was the first really big kit I had converted, right?
I remember when you're like, I just cut into a $180 model,
right, or whatever it cost. Yeah, I was like, well, no turning back now. Just started chopping stuff up. Like, well, I guess this is how this looks now. So, hope it works out. And there is an element of fear there. So maybe that's a good transition, Tom. Let's talk about conversion fear for a moment, shall we?
Yep.
So you've got a vision. Again, nothing wrong with not converting, but let's say you've got a vision and you want to do some conversions.
Yeah.
A lot of people, I think, one of the things I hear is like, well, I'm afraid I would ruin the model. People say that about paint jobs, and it doesn't make any sense, because paint can always be just painted again. You can just paint over it. You can't ruin things with paint. That's not how paint works. I'm a huge advocate of that. You can always paint over it or just strip it at worst. But with conversions, you're actually changing the model, right? So how do you get over the the answer LLV is hashtag shelve Slaanesh. You can go back and watch the part where I talked about it. At any rate, how do you get over the fear? Like, what's your answer?
Start cutting.
Okay. Just get into it.
Yeah, like, so the reality is that like I'm never not afraid I'm going to ruin something, or like I'm never not afraid that I'm not like something's not going to look bad.
Sure.
Because like it's always there. Like I am in the process of cutting heads off of dread spears right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I didn't know if it was going to work. Like they had what I wanted, and I had enough of the models that I'm like, oh no, those are going to be the bodies I'm going to use.
Right.
But like they have hair, like the heads are molded into the body, and like they have hair dangling down. So like not only do I have to cut the head off, but I have to like scrape around and smooth things out. But my first concept model, like, and so the short answer is, if you're going to do mass conversions, what you do is you try it with one model. Right. Can I get this to look good once?
Well, and that's good for like infantry and stuff. Things you're going to do multiple of. Yes.
Yes. For big monsters, I mean, you just have to console yourself that there's always green stuff.
Sure, you can always green stuff things. Yes.
Like, if you really botch a conversion job, just look at it as an opportunity to develop your green stuff skills.
Sure.
Now, let me just say that's been my plan, and I'm still terrible at green stuff. And the reason why is that I've never had to really use it.
Sure.
Like, I've always just planned on like, oh, I'm gonna have to learn green stuff if this doesn't go well. But I mean, I'm what, 4 years into this, and it still goes well. Like, get a knife, there is a one tip that I will give. And this doesn't work with all models, but if you're using all like GW plastic models, and I know Vince doesn't use this, and he's probably gonna get all snooty about this. But I love there's actually a type of glue that covers all sins, especially when you're doing cutting and like putting things where they're not normally supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's the liquid cement for plastic models that Testers does, or like liquid weld, I think they call it. It's the type of glue that melts models together.
Right.
So like I found that when I don't have perfect fits and I use this, like it'll help soften the area and mold the plastic to each other.
Right. You kind of apply a little bit, let it sit there on the joint for a little while and soften. Then you can kind of push them together, it'll stick because you've pushed it into soft plastic. Yeah. And then before it's completely cured, you can then work it together more because it's now softened to both sides of the joint. And you can actually like force a rather large gap to come together because you literally push the plastic into each other.
The other perk of this weld, by the way, the plastic weld, is that like they never come apart.
Right. Sure.
Like and as an example, I've been using some dread spears, and I had gotten some off eBay like years and years ago, and I'm like, I wonder, and so I just grabbed it and like twisted, and like the joints just broke because I wanted to do weapon swaps, and I was like, oh look, it's old and brittle, you know, like the glue's old and brittle, it just pops apart. Anything I use that plastic weld on, that's not how that works, because it entangles the plastics together. Like they don't just break apart.
Yeah. No, I'm all about it. I use Revel myself, so
Yep.
that's this.
Yep.
That's the blue and yellow bottle here. I have it up on my screen. This is what I use. Also, though, I made myself slurry. So slurry is when you take like some Tamiya thin plastic glue. I'm holding this up to the screen so people can see it. I took an old glass bottle. This was an FW like Daler-Rowney ink bottle that I used all the ink out of, right? Washed out the bottle. And then I filled it up like, I don't know, about that much with like a finger or something of thin, extra thin plastic cement from Tamiya, which is this stuff. And then I took a bunch of sprue bits and cut them into little tiny pieces and dumped them all in here and just let it sit for like a day and then just stirred it around. And it's now this like really gross gray slurry, but it still has the properties of plastic glue, but it has fill in. It will gap fill as well. So after you assemble, it will actually it will melt and fill simultaneously. It's really awesome for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, good idea.
So I'll probably do a video about that at some point and actually like show people how to make it, the actual like ratio, because I played around with ratios a few times. And like this is an old scale modeler trick, but it's just one of those things that we don't often hear about in our world. But man, is it awesome. Especially for stuff like where I found it to be really awesome is when you ever have those models where this happens a lot on especially older models where they were fashioned with like each half of the leg is one piece and you put the two legs together. And on a lot of older models, they weren't hiding that joint with armor plates or something, right? It would just be like a natural leg with a just, now you got this big seam line in the middle. And like you can sand and stuff like that, and whatever. But like that does really well. You just kind of you use the plastic glue normally, you fasten them together, then you run some of that over the top, and boom, it's gone.
Nice.
But yeah, things like Perfect Putty, green stuff for your friend. Perfect Putty is this stuff right here. Come here. There it is. Sorry. Perfect Plastic Putty. This is from Deluxe Master. This stuff, Perfect Plastic Putty. You can also just use the regular plastic putty from Vallejo and all that kind of stuff. So all those things are good. They're your friends when you're doing that. Sorry, putting it back up on my hobby shelf. Anyway, yeah, I agree. So here's what I'd say about how to lose the fear. One, you're right. Prototyping. Excellent plan, right? Get one done. Can you do one when you're if you lose one spear dude or something, or you got one funky looking spear dude, okay, right?
Right.
That's fine. But for bigger things, prior planning prevents poor performance, right?
Sure.
So like before you start cutting, take the kind of pieces and just kind of dry fit them together uncut. And see, like, is this going to be roughly about the same size? Is this going to roughly fit, right? And then slowly when you cut, don't go deep on the first strike, right? Like if you're trying to, let's say you're trying to like scrape away to fit a new piece up against it, remove very little at a time, dry fit. How's the fit? Okay, a little more. Cut it, shave the angle a little more, fit it up. Shave the angle a little more, fit it up. By working more, by like doing the complete plan before cutting and then slowly building toward it, you actually can like then get to a place where you lower the risk a lot, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's good. I go slow. Another thing that people don't think about often is like whether their model is going to be balanced or not visually. Like when you begin to add things, like what you're maybe not thinking about is like how that influences how things have to be painted.
Oh, sure.
And like, or that in proportion, like those are the two things that you need to pay a lot of attention to. Sure. Because those are two things that, one, like it's really hard to get into a project after you've done a major conversion and then realize that like what you've added actually makes it harder to paint it well. Because of like from a color balance, like color theory standpoint. and that's like, that has bothered me on a couple of occasions where I've done something and then I've realized that like the way that I've and this is particularly bad, like if you're rebasing something, and I'll give an example of this a little bit later, and like you're changing the way that like how the model's supposed to be dynamic.
Yep.
What ends up happening is that like you have to end up adding maybe other models or other things to help like rebalance it out, like repositioning arms and stuff like that to make it visually feel right.
Yep.
Those are things that you may not be thinking about on conversion. It's, you ask like, can I do this? Not should I do this?
Well, there's also the fact that because with conversions, you often don't have the ability to work in sub-assemblies in the same way, right? Because you have to see if everything actually goes together and cut it all up and then glue it. You're much more likely to get those like areas where it's hard to paint, right?
Yep.
Because something had to be assembled, and so now like there's not a lot of space to get your paintbrush in there. So what I always try to do is like be mindful of that during the assembly phase, and like if I'm trying to get a weird arm in a place with a big shield on it, I'll have the arm more out, right? I'll reposition the arm since I'm already converting anyways. You could either put the shield like right up next to the body so there's no space and you can just ignore it basically, right? Or I'll put it way out so they're kind of holding their shield, up at an out angle. So that way I still have easy access to paint everything. The point is like just think about things like that while you're doing it. If you're already cutting stuff up, why not make your life easier later, right?
Yeah, and relatedly, the other thing that it's really easy to forget about is like proportion. Like proportionality matters. And if you do something because you can, like you're like, I really like this weapon, I'm going to give this guy a big weapon, but it's out of proportion, like it doesn't matter what kind of paint job, it'll never feel right. The model will always look heavy, or the weapon will always look too small, or like for me, like this bothers some people more than others. It bothers me a whole lot.
So I just brought up a picture that drives Tom crazy to drive home. Sorry, everybody. I was switching through the pictures and then it went away. This is, and I agree. Somebody just mentioned that blue tack is your friend when dry fitting. Totally agree. Sorry, everyone, for like that little picture screw up there. I don't know what happened. The pictures just went away. But so this is a Doom Bull I had created. He's done out of like a Storm Fiend body and some of the Gorgon. Like he has a Gorgon shoulder pad and the Chaos Charioteer's cloak. And that head is the head off of Archeon's corn head, which actually fits pretty well on a Storm Fiend body, by the way, because Drogar's heads are actually rather small. But the axes. So I gave him like the full-size Bloodthirster axes, which I know drives you nuts. And he's double wielding them too.
I mean, you asked me when you initially did this model what my thoughts were like as you were painting it. And I gave you the same feedback then. And it's that like, man, those axes are just, it's silly. Like it's like a cartoon. It's not like an actual model.
Right. This is very WoW. Somebody said it's a WoW. He's got WoW weapons. And yes, I agree. Right. This is very much like that. Yeah.
Right. And I just like, I'm not interested in that. Like it doesn't, because I look at this and the model, I don't care how beautiful it's painted. Those ice axes are beautiful. They look terrible on him.
Sure.
Because it doesn't feel balanced. So for me, it is a much larger issue than it is for Vince. Although I will say Vince has gotten a lot better over the years. Like he's really dialed back his cartoony weapon displays.
Sure. Because it just doesn't appeal to me as much anymore. But I will say I still do love that guy. Okay.
I'm sure you do. And you can love bad things. We've talked about this before.
Right. And well, I want to make that point, which is like, look, if there's a conversion like that Doom Bull, for example, if that's the kind of thing, and like, I really love that big doofy dumbhead. He's so much fun. Every time I have a bunch of Doom Bulls because they're all converted. Like I love converting Doom Bulls. And they're not all like that. They're not all insane. But I've converted all of them. And whenever I get them out on the table, he's always the first one I grab because he makes me smile so much. But like if you've got a conversion and you really love it, so what if other people don't like it? So when I posted my gyrocopter this last weekend, right, which is very, very mechanical, right? And said, this is my gyrocopter. Some portion of the responses I got were, it doesn't feel like Age of Sigmar to me, right? It's not fantasy enough. It's too sci-fi.
Right.
Fair. Like, and I'm not judgmental of that feedback.
I would be. I'd be like, you do realize we're talking about helicopters in fantasy, right?
look, I understand KO, blah blah blah. Lots of things. It's been around forever, and KO have skyships and balloons full of magic cloud gas that lets them zip around the board at hyperspeed. It's all good. Like, I am not judging your interpretation of the thing, but don't let anybody else judge yours either.
Sure.
Right? If you like the model and it fits in your army and your aesthetic, then cool. Great. Because you've created something that's yours and you, and that is always better. Right? Like, don't let other people dictate what's cool or appropriate. And by the way, this can go a lot of directions. I hate like people who want to be sort of lore gatekeepers of like, that's not how that thing should or could or would look. Get out of here. This is my army and my figures. You own them. You get to do with them what you want. Make your army your own. Right? And don't let anybody else talk you out of that. Like the giant, like I did a lot of conversions with my orcs. Like I have orcs writing. I don't have a picture of this, but I have like, and yes, absolutely. Thank you, Manzak. He said Masters of the Universe, techno barbarians all day, and that's exactly right. Like I grew up on fantasy where it was swords and nunchucks against laser guns and tanks. That's all I'm saying. Thundercats. Oh, so anyways, like I put orcs onto the little bird dogs or whatever, from the Palador kit, and did all sorts of fun stuff like that because that's what I wanted my orcs to be, So I think that like you have to be. There's no correct level of conversion.
Sure. Can we talk about the ranges of conversion and just
that's exactly where I was going to go. Yes.
To help people visualize what this looks like.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Because like I sent you like 3 or 4 photos of my night haunt because I want to talk about like the full like scope of like it can be something very small and subtle that no one else notices. Like conversions don't have to be garish and weird.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. They can be very subtle. And technically like in paint judging for events like that take this stuff into account.
This often comes up on checklists. Yes. The conversions.
Yeah, the conversions. And it can be something small and simple to like help put your model in that world.
Mm-hmm.
Can you pull up my my infantry night haunt guys?
I sure can.
I like it's like 3 in a row maybe, and then a rider together.
Yes, I got them. So we have 2 chain rasps, a banshee, and your the guy on half a horse.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about what we see here. And the irony here is that I sent these to you. And I don't have them in front of me, and I can't actually see them because of the delay. Let me pull it up real quick on my email.
They're coming up right now. There you go. If you're watching live, now you see them.
Yeah, I see them. Okay, here we go. So what's so fascinating about this is that like the conversions here are fairly subtle. Can you zoom in at all?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and as LLV has observed, these basically are all just weapon swaps.
Right, because you've got, and like, you might not even notice really some of it, right? Like, so you want to talk about the Banshee, because that's the one that I think is interesting. You want to talk about her real quick? Like, no, they're all interesting. I'm just saying, like, she's super subtle. People might not even know, so.
Right, so what I did was, like, I wanted, the problem with Night Haunt, the beauty of the problem is that they're almost all monopose. Like, the entire army is monopose. And it's really hard to like, other than doing something with paint schemes, to like reposition or to like mess with them, right?
Yep.
And so like when I realized that I wanted to do the Dark Elf thing, what I realized is that I just need to go in and like just convert things and add the pieces that I want to make them feel like they're coming out of like Elfie graves rather than out of other graves. And I decided to do that primarily with my monoposes with weapons.
Yep.
So on the Banshee, I took a Witch Elf dagger. They had these like really thin stilettos, and I gave her a Witch Elf dagger. Now, that choice of Witch Elf dagger for me was intentional, right?
Yep.
Because like Banshees are female elves, And so like witch elves, like I wanted it to feel in theme. And so like that is the type of weapon that they would have, would be a witch elf dagger. But when I positioned it, it was a curved dagger. I had to be really careful to make sure the movement of the model like fit with how the weapon was sitting.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. You want to talk about Mr. Headdress Rider over here? Because he's really cool too. I think that's nice change there.
Yeah. So if for anybody that knows Dark Elves, they just have these crazy like headpieces.
Yeah, they do.
On the helms. And so I wanted to call back to that with all of my guys, like all the Cold One Knights have these crazy headpieces. And so I grabbed this one and stapled it to him, and he had a big long sword, and so I lopped off and there's actually a weapon swap on him as well. He uses the Executioner's sword. Mm-hmm. But I had to be careful about like it's huge. Like that headpiece is huge. And so making sure like it didn't throw off the balance of the model itself or like where the eye was being drawn, right?
Sure. No, and I think it works well in his case because the lines of it and the curves of it actually fit well with the rest of the model.
Right. But that's the point, is like finding the right headpiece. I had a whole bunch of those headpieces, mm-hmm. right? But finding the right headpiece that like fit with the model.
No, not literally stapled. Somebody asked in the comments, did you literally staple it? No, you didn't literally staple it. No. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. And then just for the other two guys, I did weapon swaps. And so one of the reasons why, by the way, I did Dark Elves is that Dark Elves had this really interesting stylized skull.
Yeah. On all their stuff, yeah.
On a lot of their stuff. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to accentuate that in the army to make it feel like this like deathy army. Mm-hmm. And to give a different feel to an image that's always been the same, right?
Right.
And so, like, if you look at like the one chain rasp on the right, the weapon that I chose, for the chain rasp, it's like that has a very ghosty feel on both the axe and on the sword.
Yep.
And so like you look at that sword and you look at that axe and you think, oh, that could fit in a death army. And that's part of the point, is that like I wanted it to feel very natural. And a lot of people would see this and not see that a weapon swap has ever even been done.
Right. And and that's the point. There is a gamut here you can run in between very minor up to pretty extreme. Let's talk about your like to the point where you're literally building it out of basically bits into a new model. I want to talk about your Luminarch, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to jump over to your Luminarch here. And in the middle we can like some of your other KO, I'll just hand on them for a moment. Just to say, these guys are kind of in the middle where you've kind of mixed in Fire Slayer bits and KO bits and
right.
Dwarfy bits to make these guys, and you can see how there's the different elements of everything. Like you even pulled like the Heish Battle Mage bit or whatever, right? That's what that little navigator thing is. So just little tiny pieces like that make them fit in. There's lots of ways to go up there where you're mixing some heads and some different pieces and some different elements, or the other end of the spectrum, something like this, which is your Luminarch. So talk about this guy for a moment, because this guy's fun. I'm going to zoom in on him a little bit so we can see him a little more clearly.
Yeah, so the Luminarch, like I wanted a chariot that felt very techy, right?
Yep.
And a big piece of the army that I had put together was using the Sector Mechanicus train.
Yep.
And so I went, I need to build some type of platform. Like it needs to not be a ship, but it needs to feel like it's in the same universe. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was I grabbed some of the Sector Mechanicus terrain, turned it sideways.
Which this is the same base piece, by the way, I'm using for my steam tank. So
yeah, totally. And so what I did was with this guy is that so I just took the terrain, turned it on its side. Grab turbines
out of the same kit. Yep.
Out of the same kit, and put them on the side like little. I joke around. This is like my Serenity ship,
right?
It has the same like little like duck look, little mechanical ducky.
I'm showing everybody on the screen right now where these pieces come out of the Alchemite stack. There you go.
Yep. And then I used the frigate balloon in the rear engine and the rear engine. And then for the actual for the actual turret, though, what I wanted to do was I went and got the turret off of the so that's an ironclad turret.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I was kind of messing around with it to see like what I could do to get it to work. And like, so what you don't see there is that turret actually is fully, like, it fully rotates.
Right.
Because what I did was I grabbed one of the pieces that slot into, like, one of the Sector Mechanicus pieces. It's like a fan or whatever.
Yep.
That like slots into that coupling there. And I used it as the base of the turret.
Right.
And I magnetized it. And so like that whole turret is fully rotatable, or because it's a magnet holding it together. And likewise, I can pull that off and put the bits for a Huracanum there. And so, like, that's what people haven't seen of this, is that, like, I can take the same piece, pull the turret off, and put a Huracanum thing, and make this a Huracanum.
Right. Yep. It's a good piece. It's a good swap. And then obviously it still uses the lenses of the Luminarch, so like, it's very clear that it has that signifier, and I think that's one of the keys, right? When I think about very heavy scale conversions, what I always focus on is, does it still have like the representational components that make it recognizable in some way? So like with this, the recognizable thing of the Luminarch is the Luminarch lenses that make the big laser beam, right? That's the defining thing that separates it from something like the Huracanum. So everything else around that can be very different, right?
Right. That and the wizard. Like, technically, you're supposed to have a wizard on there, which is why I have the navigator on the top.
Not anymore. You can just have a Luminarch without a wizard, but sure. But at any rate, the point being is that, like, that's why, like, with my Steam Tank Commander, I put a big cannon on the bottom and have a little gun up on the top, right? Because the defining features of that model are it has a big cannon and it has a machine gun. Those are the two things it has, right? And so I always try to make sure, like, if I'm swapping weapons, the weapons are still reasonable facsimiles for that weapon, right? So if they have a
great weapon, do a great weapon.
Right. Yeah, don't give him like some one-handed thing and a shield, right? So like if you've got a guy, if you're trying to mimic greatswords or something. Okay, great. And you put big two-handed axes in some of their hands, or big two-handed halberds or something like that in their hands. Great. Okay, cool. Right, they're all big two-handed choppy weapons. I get it. That's like at the level this game operates at, those are all mechanically, I'm on the level, right? I see what's going on there. Yeah.
Right.
So like, I think that having some kind of like defining feature is a key. Yeah. And I really liked this conversion. I thought it was a lot of fun. Obviously it inspired me because when I was starting to scheme out and prototype the Whirlwind's Edge army, I reached out to you and I was like, hey, what pieces did you use for that? And I was trying to like look everything up because I knew I had a bunch of that. I just had to go find it.
You made a wise decision.
Yeah, absolutely. No, 100%. The other thing I would say is, let's talk about how you actually convert other things into sort of like counts as type of stuff, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because I think you can also, what I want to specifically talk about here is kind of the question you asked me, right?
Yeah.
The other day when we were talking about a potential conversion. So walk us through that one, because I think this is an interesting thing a lot of people will run into with cities.
Yeah. So I was trying to figure out. I wanted to, like, I don't mind, I'll spoil it. So I was wanting to do executioners, right?
Yep.
And but I wanted to use basically all of Phoenix Guard.
Right. You want the Phoenix Guard bodies.
I wanted the bodies, the stances, the fiery stuff. Like, I wanted all of that. I was going to do head swaps and all that stuff. But the question was, is it enough to do the fire? Is it enough to just, like, as an executioner, to basically do head swaps and paint schemes and with the same halberds and call them executioners?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's still a great weapon. Like, if you read the executioners wield drakes, Draich.
Sure.
What is that?
A big giant. I mean, traditionally it's a big giant greatsword, but yes.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't say halberds. Like, I know what a halberd is.
Right.
Is it, and so like, so how do we visualize this? And like, what kind of a conversion is enough?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like another example that I was wrestling with is that like I'm doing an Eternal Guard unit.
Yep.
Okay. And like literally, my Eternal Guard are dread spears with skeleton heads.
Mm-hmm.
Because that looks like an Eternal Guard, right?
Sure.
Eternal Guard have spears, shields, and these guys are skeletons, so they're Eternal Guards.
I get it. It's a good pun.
Like, thanks. Yeah, I thought so too. But but in all practicality, I look at it and go, it's just a head swap. You know, like I'm using the same arms and shields and everything.
Well, no, you keyed in on something I think is really important there. That, like, yes, sometimes with minimal conversions, you can still do it as long as, one, you're consistent. Two, it can be minimal, but three, the paint scheme. Right? Like, your army that you're building has this very, dark elf, Drakey focus, right?
Yeah.
And and so bringing them into that and making the paint scheme not look like what we would perceive as Phoenix Guard, but making it looks like it fit in the rest of the army. And when you go along, and you don't have it in an army with Phoenix Guard, nobody's getting confused, right? Your army is just like, these are the executioners in the army, right? And there's no other. It's still clear enough. It's infantry. It's the correct size. It's an elf. You've painted it to be that dark scheme, like a dark elf type of looking executioner, what we would imagine they'd look like. You've given them a skull face, like the classic skull mask of the executioner. So there's still that signifier. Right.
Yeah. The other thing is that to make sure that, like, yes, but, and here's the exception, is to make sure that you're not actually playing in, like, that you're not including the other units that they could be confused with. And that's another big piece of this, is that, like, if you're going to use all dread spears with head swaps, don't put dread spears in the army.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Be consistent. Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a good point. And so I think like those kind of unit things are going to be very popular, especially now, especially with like in the cities where people had a lot of models that, potentially aren't around anymore and they want to find uses for them in the current model range. Right. And I don't, as I said before, and we'll say again, I really have no problem with that at all and think it should be largely encouraged. If you're actually investing the time, the paint, the scheme, you're not just like picking up your unit of Phoenix Guard and being like, well, I guess these are great swords now. Right.
Sure.
And that's it. Like, this is a concept brought real through like some kind of thoughtful application of paint and modification of the model.
Right.
The other thing I want to, so yes, agreed completely. For me, one of the other elements that I want to really dig into here is when you're converting to theme. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
I think one of the most powerful things you can do is across the army convert to a singular theme. Okay. So Steve Herner famously has a lot of armies where he's done this because he's a madman when it comes to conversions in the best way. Classically, he had his Rats and Hats, which was his sort of Pirates of Penzance Skaven, where they all had big, feathery hats, and some of them had, different other signifiers of the Empire, right?
Right.
Because he made the army back during old Warhammer Fantasy Battle days. He has his like Doom Knights of Sigmar, where he's put these big, green, flowing, lustrous Doctor Doom cloaks on all of them, right?
Yep.
And so I think those kind of like conversions to a theme across the army actually are one of the most powerful things you can do with conversion, because whenever you've got a particular idea and you can execute it across the whole army, it suddenly makes the entire force your own, not just that fig your own, right?
Right.
And which I think the important part there is the same rule applies. Plan from the beginning, because you're not always going to be able to carry the same exact conversion across every element of the army, right?
Yeah. So an example of this from some of my own work is my Fire Slayer army.
Sure.
Everybody has mohawks, folks. All of them. It's the most expensive army in existence. I mean, it's not, but like every 10 Arcanaut company was $100 MSRP.
Sure.
But it's but yeah, like, so I did it with like big, like actual head swap beards with actual like Fire Slayer crests.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's an example from my old days. I'll go to an older paint job I did. Let's fly over here. Here we go. So I have some of my old, back early on in when AOS launched, I did an army of Stormcast because, why not? They just came out, right?
Yep.
And so what I have up on here is some of my like Grail cast. And so all of them universally across the army have a bunch of Bretonnian signifiers, right? So like in this case, the heads are all Bretonnian knight helms, or some of them don't wear the helm, but they have like Bretonnian human helms, right? So I went to the same army consistently. Everybody has the Bretonnian knight helms. When they had shields, I sanded off all of the lightning bolts and hammers and stuff like that are on the Stormcast shields, and painted on like fleur-de-lis and other elements of the Bretonnian army, right? I didn't use their, like what I'm looking at. I brought up the prosecutors, by the way, and the reason I brought up the prosecutors is because I didn't use the like light line wings or whatever they're called. They're kind of, I don't know what they really are, but you know what I mean. They're standard prosecutor wings. I switched them for just feathered wings, right? Which felt much more sort of grounded and like what these kind of knights would be having, as they're sort of like these Grailcast returned Bretonnian knights recast into Stormcast, right?
Pegasus Knights renewed.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of thing. And then to lead the army, there he was. Sorry, I jumped right past him. I made my own Celestant Prime, right? And I wanted it to actually be like Guillaume Le Breton, rise from your graves, like coming out of his grave, right? So again, still gave him Golmaraz, the big hammer. He still has the Bretonnian helm, and it's a Bretonnian head. But then I gave him like the wings off of, what was that, like Elohir or whatever, the griffin out of Island of Blood.
Sorry, I was thinking the cloak. I think that's
whoever it was.
Yeah.
And yes, Noganakker said they almost look like Drukhari Scourge wings. That's because they are Drukhari Scourge wings. Because when you need a lot of feathered wings, Drukhari Scourge wings are the way to go, because that Scourge box comes with 2 sets of wings, leather and feathered, meaning there's always an extra set around people are looking to get rid of. So there you go. So this is my Celestant Prime, right? He's actually on the wrong base because I didn't have the official base at the time, but that's okay. It's fine.
And so interestingly, notice the signifiers here, folks.
Yeah, the big hammer. Yeah, go ahead.
The big hammer, the rising.
Yep.
Like the actual position of the miniature himself is similar.
Right. I tried to make him, and it's not like the Celestant Prime body. This is converted out of just like a bunch of different random Stormcast. Yeah.
Right, but like he actually even mimicked the pose.
Right. Because I wanted it to feel like when I put it down on the table, people would be like, "Oh yeah, that's your Celestant Prime," right? Because big, winged, singular dude with a giant hammer rising up in this floating, flying position. Like, yep, great. Those kind of signifiers being there. So I think that's that kind of theme when you can execute it. Now, there's also just, Tom, one thing we should mention here is, let's talk about just conversions for fun.
Like the cool factor?
Yeah, the cool factor, man. Right? Like, there's no reason you can't do rule of cool stuff. Like, don't ever feel like you can't just live in rule of cool, where you've got an idea and you want to do a conversion. It's not going to be, oh, I know, there's so much Cork looking like Cork in that army. It was the first, I did that army, like, in my defense, 4 years ago when I was still using a lot of Cork basing. I don't like any of that now. I apologize. But it's terrible and bothers me every day. But at any rate, that's why I keep it around. It's there to remind us of our shame and the road we've traveled. Sometimes you just want to convert a single model, right? Because you want that one model to just be cool and your own.
Yep.
There is no problem with that. That's how I would encourage people to actually start playing around. If you haven't done a lot of converting, that's where you start, right? You pick 1 or 2 character models or a couple dudes out of an infantry pack. Like we mentioned ogres earlier having easy conversion capability. Picking a couple Iron Guts or a couple of the regular ogre dudes, or one of your ogre characters, and adding on some extra pistols or having him carrying a banner or having him have some extra Novlars bouncing around him, right? That's where you start. You know what I mean? That's how you get comfortable.
Yep. Hey, can you jump to my black coach real quick?
I can, absolutely. Let's black coach it up. There we go. Black coach is up.
Yeah, so...
Because this is definite rule of cool with how you got it up off the base, for sure, if nothing else. I mean, there's more going on, but yes, that, indeed.
Yeah, so, like, I wanted to do this one because I think that this encaptures... Like, there's so much going on here, and a lot of it's subtle, and actually, like, most people will never pick up the changes that have happened. And yet, they came upon... Like, they happened because I wanted... I wanted a flying, sweet-looking chariot. Now, there's a pragmatic problem here because, like, this model overhangs its base.
Like bad.
Like bad. Like, you can't get it into combat without entangling it with other things.
Right.
And so there's a pragmatic problem that I wanted to solve. But I also wanted it to look amazing. And so, like, I figured out what I needed to do to hang it. But it's interesting. So you notice all the spirits down below? Vince, could you zoom in on those?
Sure, man.
So one of the fascinating things about it is I did this and I put it up here and I went, this is a problem. Because visually it was so heavy, like up top.
Yeah, you had no color symmetry, right? All your color was loaded at the top, right?
Right. And because I had such a poppy green, I had to pull the eyes up or pull the eyes down. And so, like, the natural, like, recourse in the narrative of what's going on. Okay, this thing's flying over a graveyard. What's going to happen? It's going to, it's
going to wake up the other ghosts. Yeah.
Right. Like, that's how this works. Right. And so, like, I had to develop the narrative out of, like, a very pragmatic, like, color balancing problem.
Right.
Interestingly, originally I also had I was going to put a bunch of vines down here with the purple flowers to pull the purple down, but I didn't end up doing that simply because I didn't feel like I needed to because the purple wasn't as poppy as the green.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. But that at the same time, I think you could have, and it would have been fine. But yes, I agree. Dark purple doesn't draw the eye in the same way bright colors like this neon Escorpina style green does.
Right. And so, so I had to balance it. But so this model was driven fully by the desire to just have sweet looking model flying, and to go into like a weird, like go like an event style base, right? Because Vince is obviously renowned for doing this silly like base flying model situation.
Absolutely. The guy I just showed was rising out of a whole similar cemetery situation. So yes.
Right. So let me ask Vince, look over this model and tell me, like, what other things stand out to you of things that I've changed. I'm going to do a little quiz for you.
Yeah, sure. I don't know. My wife just walked in, by the way, so the dogs barked. So I have to be careful and be ready to go on mute if dogs go insane.
That's fine.
I don't know this kit well enough, honestly.
Right.
What else have you changed? Here's what I'll say. Nothing else stands out as incongruous with the kit. How about that?
No, that's fair. No, that's good. So let me highlight some super subtle changes that I made here. Like, some were just pragmatic changes that needed to happen. So, for example, see all the smoke trails down below? Like, those originally weren't flowy like that because they had to rest on the ground. They were the contact points that the whole model rested on for the horses. And so, like, I had to cut off and, like, recarve some of those to get rid of all the stone and all that of the flowy smoke around their feet.
Nice.
Okay. Another one is to zoom in. There's a head swap on the Carriage Master.
Okay.
to bring it in line with the heads of all of the rest of my hex wraiths, to make it feel more in line with that army. And if you'll notice, I converted the scythe, like I did many scythes in this army, to be a halberd, the Blackguard halberd. So again, very small, subtle kind of
No, I
tweak.
agree. It's very minor changes, but they work well.
Okay, there's one other change that I made here that I'm super proud of, and basically no one will ever notice it unless I tell them.
Okay.
And that's, go to the next picture of the like the entourage. No, I didn't poach Kurdos. That's the normal model.
I don't see him. I don't see an entourage picture. I have...
Oh, like the guys that are hanging onto the chariot. I call them his entourage. Yeah.
Got it. Oops. I'll see if I can find it here. Hold on. All right. That's about as good as I can get it.
Well, like there's some that I have like of...
I have a zoom in of the guys. That's what I think.
Okay, well, no. Like it's not the big photo. It's just a...
Yeah, I have the zoom in of the 4 guys in back.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, you're like, sorry, the delay is killing me. Okay. So what I actually did here is fairly subtle, and it's that these guys normally their robes are normally like empty.
Okay.
Like they don't have skulls.
Oh, so you actually put little skulls in there?
So I actually had the skull kit and carved out skulls until I got them to fit in the robe, and added the jawbones to have them screaming like all the rest of the models.
Nice. Yeah, because you do get separate jawbones in the skull kit. Yeah.
Right. But like I went in and like hand added those because it wasn't the right aesthetic. Like when you look at every other model in the army, they have skulls.
Yeah, here we go. I flipped over images, and this one shows a little better. Sorry. Now that I see what you're aiming at, I see what you're going for here. And yes, I see now. The skulls really look nice.
Yeah. Like, but no one, and also like they're all faced in. So unless you're like actually working to look, you often won't see the skulls. But for me, that was a consistency thing. That has nothing to, like, that doesn't visually change the model almost at all.
Right.
And yet, like, it has to do with it feeling consistent across the entire army.
No, I think it's solid. It's a minor touch, but man, is it a great touch, dude. I would have never noticed, honestly. Like, it's a testament to how good that conversion is, right? That little crown that's on the middle, dude, is always part of the kit, right?
Yes, that the crown is part of the kit naturally. Yeah. The imagery of like thorns, like vines with thorns, it goes across the entire army, which is a fantastic thing if you're wanting to like, mix in wanderers into the thing, and you have like the system of the thorn. Like, so there's actually like a lot of really neat conversions that I'm going to be playing with as I expand out the army. But yes, so the vine with thorns and roses are a consistent image across the army.
Nice. Yeah, it's cool. That's great. Yeah, I'm going to jump to a couple of my Rule of Cool models here. Yeah. This is great, Tom. You really did fantastic on this Black Coach. It's great. I can't wait to see it in person in a week and a half. So I'm going to scan through some stuff here. There's the gyrocopter. There's my own Huracanum I did. This is this is one of the early like Rule of Cool models that I did. So this is Khalida. Those who know that I still submit I have one of the biggest Tomb King forces in the world, as I have 14,000 points of Tomb Kings painted. There's probably somebody with more, but, I'm just saying. I'm up there. And I loved the Tomb Kings, and I loved Khalida. Khalida was always my girl. And so you can have a lord on Sphinx, right? So you have a Tomb King on Sphinx, a Royal War Sphinx. And I always loved this concept. And so I wanted to do a Khalida-themed Royal War Sphinx. So like I got the Khalida model, and then I pulled out some parts from the Coven Throne. Is that what that is? Yeah, Coven Throne / Mortis Engine, yeah. And then as well as like the side curtains and stuff like that. As well as I took apart, I found an old snake swarm from the Lizardmen, like the old school snake swarm snakes. I found a bunch of those and took them off their bases and put them all over her base and her dais and stuff, so she had snakes all around her.
To accentuate the snake imagery that she had.
Yeah, exactly. Because she was the asp, right? She was the queen of the asp.
Yep.
And I love this kit so much. It was so ready for conversion, and man, was this a fun one to do. She was great. I really, really enjoyed this one. And then of course this guy, still one of my favorite conversions I've ever done. This is, we'll get to the one that's higher than this in a moment. This is my mega boss on Maw Crusher or Maw Chicken. This is the Flaming Rooster. I'll let you fill in alternate words for rooster. And he, so like obviously this guy's converted in a lot of little ways. The Maw Crusher's heavily converted. He's got the Zinch bird head from Archaon. And I actually want to point out a fun way to cover gaps here as well. When I put this model together, the bird head and the things I was using didn't really fit into this giant neck socket.
Weird.
That the Maw Crusher had.
Yep.
So I again took the skull kit. Skull kit is the ultimate answer. Let me say that. But I took the skull kit and gave him a necklace of skulls. You know what I'm saying? Like I made a little thin green stuff thing and then just laid a bunch of skulls down, and it covered some of the little gaps and made it look like, and bulked out that area at the same time. So it looked like a more natural transition into the actual neck, right?
Yep.
And then obviously those are the wings off of the Lord of Change back there. Because I had to shave off the normal Maw Crusher wings. He doesn't have his normal gimpy wings. He has just the back wings. Yeah. Cool. So this one, oh my gosh, you talk about a moment of no return. Like there's always some moment of no return in a conversion project. The moment when I literally just took my clippers to the like neck structure of the Maw Crusher and cut his head off in this giant chopping thing and was like, well,
here we go.
That's it, because the head was just ruined.
Right.
At that point,
right.
Like, there was no going back. But I understand at that point, I had like fit the head, tried a bunch of different heads. You know what I mean? Like I had done a lot of like pre-planning before that happened, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I would encourage you, keep your bits organized. Go to like the dollar store, get yourself the little jewelry bead boxes or whatever. Get a bunch of those. Separate your bits. I separate them by army. You can do it however makes sense for you. Maybe you've got a box of heads, box of weapons, whatever makes sense. But separate your bits in some logical fashion. It will make your life so much easier later when you're converting. Because what I did is just like went and got out the appropriate bits I thought would work. Everything's organized. I can dump a bunch of bits out on your workspace and then just start putting things together, right? Grab the thing you're trying to change and say, does this piece work? No, yes, I don't know. Does this piece work? Maybe. And you can go back and forth, right?
Well, it's funny that you say that. Like, it's actually the fact that I had an overflowing Dark Elf bits box.
Right.
That I was like, oh, maybe I could use these for some of those weapon swaps. Remember, like and so part of it was like a very practical concern of like, man, I need to find weapons for my Night Haunt. Oh, I have a bunch of these Dark Elf weapons. Okay, well, I can use those. And I was like, well, wait a minute. And then that's like, then the narrative began to kind of like come together of like, no, this is a Dark Elf force. And what else can I do? And so, like keeping those things consistent, like, there's value to that.
Yeah, 100%. And also the mention there is exactly what Steve Herner had said earlier. Like he made a fun conversion with one rat wearing a hat because it seemed fun, right? It was one model. And then he was like, I'm going to do a whole army like this, right? Like it behooved the further creations. So sometimes by taking the leap, by playing with one model, you can actually then like get inspired to do the whole force, right? Double Screaming Bell. That one's fun. We looked at him already. So here you go. This is truly my favorite conversion I've ever done. This is the most recent one. This is Archael, my Slaanesh Archaon conversion. Which is huge. She's 23 inches tall, I think. Like so much so she's back in my shelf behind me, but like I had to remove a whole shelf just to fit her in there.
And a long time in the making, by the way. Like
this is
you have
year
no idea.
Plus in the making. Yes. Like of thinking about it, planning it out, getting the kits, the bits. Yeah, absolutely. We talked about this at Holy Wars one year, and it took me a year and a half at least to make this.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, and like I've got a zoomed in one here so we can see like this is obviously Archaon, but then he has things like the I like adding shoulder pads to Dorgar because he's actually like he needs some spot color there. His normal shoulders are kind of boring. So this one, the previous Tzeentch one was using the shoulders off the Demon Prince because they fit pretty perfectly. This one's using the shoulders off of the other Chaos Chariot that's not the normal one. What's that stupid
the Gore
Gore Beast? Yeah, it's the Gore Beast shoulder pads, right? Like his armor thing. It's using the Maw the head off of the Mutalith Vortex Beast. Right?
Yep.
And then obviously Archeon when Archeon activates his Slaanesh form, of course he becomes a female persona, so he becomes Archeol. So I used Alariel here. This model was partially made to spite Tyler Emerson. So to tie it back to our earlier pick of the week, spite in the best way. He and I have had a long time running joke about that Alariel is a fake god and not at all interesting. So I part of this was done out of the best kind of spite. And then like Daemonette heads and the big giant claws and whips and stuff like that. So added onto Alariel. But this was just like, this was a long project and this is my favorite thing I've ever done. She's up on this fallen house and there's all sorts of signifiers of violence and torture and depravity that are down in the house hidden away and little pieces like that. Yeah, this was sort of like the capstone piece for the army, right? It was meant to be the thing.
Yeah.
And yes, this is a 3D printed house base, like Ruined Mayor's Mansion or something, printed by the man himself, Crazy Horse Anthony Polcastro, a true hobby hero. So,
indeed.
Yep. And then I just flipped over. The next project I'm working on, I also just have my Free Guild General on Griffin in here too, which I took a frigate and a bunch of other pieces and big giant mechanical wings and gave the frigate claws. So it actually has claws like a griffin and can actually like stab people. And I converted the guy out of a bunch of different parts because I wanted him to still be Free Guild but have heavy armor and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that gets to like the end of like what I want to talk about, which is that like at some point of converting in your journey, you will go, okay, there's nothing that I want to modify that does what I want it to do. So now I just need to bring something into existence from nothing.
Right.
Okay. And so like that's what Vince has done here. Another example of this is can you go my Spider Fang
Yeah,
sure. Doom Diver?
Yep. Absolutely.
So like this was back, I made this during the end of 8th. I was doing a Forest Goblin Greenskin army. And I was doing all Forest Goblin stuff, and so I wanted to have a bunch of siege weapons, and there was just no way to get there with what they had, and so what I ended up doing was I made my own model. Right. The shaman had a little like spider like skin cloak, and it looked like wings of the Doom Diver. And so I went, sure, let's do that. And so I found other bits and I put them on there and added some crew to the base. And then for the web, for the lines on the catapult, I got some actual wire and twisted it up and made little catapult lines. And what you actually can't see here is that, like, again, leaning back into like the story aspect of this, I have one of the giant spiders from the Arachnarok kit that would pull back the catapults, pulling back his chair. Like, you can't see it from this angle, but
it's what's actually causing the string to stretch. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And so like creating that internal continuity. So, and I could have sculpted some of this, but I mean, I did this within the first year in the hobby. Yep. So like, this is all just taking bits that were already there, and making things of my own imagination. More recently, jumped to my Night Haunt, the 2 Cav models of my Night Haunt. I'm going to reveal, so one is going to be my Warlord for Havoc this weekend.
Yep.
Or in a week and a half. And the other is going to be, I'm going to show what my Hex Wraiths look like.
Yep, I got both up now.
Okay. So the one on the left is my warlord for Havoc. You need to have a warlord. It has to be like some custom, like it's some custom model. It has a custom war scroll, but they're supposed to like mimic other units. Like, so they'll take on like the command ability of a unit in your army. And so I wanted to do one based on the Knight of Shrouds. And so I wanted it to feel like a Knight of Shrouds, but I also wanted it to feel like a Mortark.
Yep.
And so I took the base Knight of Shrouds. I did the head swaps and the weapon swaps that are needed to bring this in line aesthetically with the rest of my army.
You know, the Dark Elf horns just work really well on these guys.
Don't they, though?
They really do. Like, yeah, they really do.
And, like, you zoom in, and they have the little, like, skull in the temple.
I know.
Yeah, like, dude, it's so good. Like, the aesthetic across this army is so consistent. It's like the dragon aesthetic in my Fire Slayer is that, like, I was able to pull bits. Like, it's, like, I've been very impressed just with how well it's dovetailed in here. It literally writes itself. But sometimes, like, to get the visual flow that I wanted to, you actually have to like mess with stuff. So if you zoom in on like the left-hand side, so those ghost spirits, like a lot of them came from like Mortark bases or from maybe Spirit Host bases. But the one on the left, the little dude that's like slinking out of the skull, that one is actually the one from Nagash's hand.
Oh, nice.
That I had to like merge into that. But I wanted it, like, I wanted to have the broad feel, but I wanted it to feel different than the momentum of the ones on the right. And so, like helping to like figure that out and then get all the positioning right so that they're all facing, so as if they're all staring at the same object, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so like those are things that like as the longer you go down this road, the more you'll need to think about. Like, yes, I wanted to add spirits, but like I wanted them to all feel like they're staring at the same person.
Yeah, like they're coming for the same enemy this guy is sort of driving toward. Yeah.
Right. So that's what I wanted to point out about him. And then the guy to the right is I wanted to show an example for me of pulling together a bunch of like kit bashing basically from the ground up. The guy on the right, those are my Hex Wraiths. You'll notice that I opted out of the scythes because I just don't like them. I got rid of scythes from almost the entire army. I have a couple exceptions. I've left the scythes in there, but in general, I've just pulled them out of the army because they're just too over the top and overdone. And so for my Hex Wraiths, I needed to have the flames, right? Like that's one of the stereotypical aspects of the Hex Wraiths. And so I left the legs, but I kept, like, I added flaming skulls. And it's hard. I guess I should have chosen a different model to demonstrate this. But to help like visually balance the model, but then I needed Dark Elf bits. And so I used a bunch of the Cold One Knight bits of the hands and the like on the one hand, the lances of them, but then I also used Black Knight bits for like the shield arms. So I actually had skeletal arms. So like helping kind of make this balance and feel right was a model by model basis based on the bits that were being used. And so sometimes in order to create that consistency, you can't just like copy paste one kit over, like one part of a kit over into another kit. Right. You'll literally have to go model by model as you build them.
Sure.
But yeah.
Yeah, somebody asked in the comments about tips for working with green stuff or epoxy. Yeah, I mean, my answer is get yourself a set of water. Get yourself a set of clay shapers, which are, you can just, if you look up clay shapers, you'll find them. You can get hard and soft, and get any standard little pack will get you going. I have a bunch of different ones that look like this. They're just this like very simple little sculpting tool, rubbery tipped sculpting tools. They look like paintbrushes, but they have little rubber tips. And get yourself a set of like the little dentist tools, which are things that look like this, the little metal things. They have different little ends on them for doing different shapes and cutting and working with it. So those kind of elements. A set of each of those, and you're good to go. Work on water. If you're working on accessory pieces like feathers or like little ribbons or stuff like that, just sculpt it completely off the model. Sculpt it on like a piece of on like a little makeup mirror or something. You can buy cheap makeup mirrors, set them flat on your desk, and work on that. And once it dries, it won't stick to the mirror because the mirror has nothing for the green stuff to adhere to. So you can literally just peel it right off once it's completely dry.
I actually use the little like 6x9 picture frames.
Yeah.
Like the cheapy ones. I got one of those and just popped out the glass.
Sure.
And so I have a little 6x9 sheet of glass that I work on.
Yep. And the green stuff won't adhere to that glass. So you can literally just like make little, sometimes I'll make little feathers or little like, just if I want to do dangly ribbons, or like purity seals are a pretty common one for 40K stuff. You can just make a bunch of them down on there and then just let them dry, and you just pop them right off and glue them on your model as a little accessory. Manzak, you would know better than me on this. He's done, so Manzak, who just made a comment of like, mix it with Magic Sculpt. Don't use green stuff on its own. Interesting. Magic Sculpt I know is quite good. I'll be honest and say I've never messed around with it too much. I've used a couple different types of 2-part epoxy beyond green stuff. But I haven't done any full-fledged sculpting except for one time when I took a 2-day class about how to sculpt miniatures, and at the end of it I was like, oh good, I never want to do that again. That was terrible. But like the other thing I would say is, keep your tools wet. I know some people use like Vaseline and stuff. I've never found that to be completely necessary, as long as you're working carefully and keeping your tools moist so they don't stick to the green stuff. If you're trying to build up a large area, if you're trying to do like something quite complicated, like a cloak and then some hair over it or something, and then a braid in the hair and then a crown or in the hair, whatever, I don't know. Don't try to do that all at once. You can think about green stuff in the same way you think of paint. Like you can work in layers. So you can sculpt just like if you've got a gap to fill, then you want to put a cloak over it. Okay, just fill the gap first. Let that dry. Now do the cloak. Let that dry.
Right.
Now do the hair hanging over the cloak. Let that dry. Like the point is that way you can keep the parts separated. Because if everything's wet and you're trying to really carefully sort of handle a model and move it around, everything's going to stick together poorly, and it'll kind of, you'll mess up some of your previous work. Whereas if you just work slowly and carefully and you work layer by layer up on the sculpt and kind of build it up, you'll have a lot better results.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
But there's a lot of good advice. There's a lot of good tutorials from people much better than me at sculpting out there. You can hunt up, and I would highly recommend you do that. So Tom, there we go. That's conversions. I hope we've inspired people to create some armies, or to step outside, or to not be afraid to chop up some models. Any closing thoughts you've got on converting models?
Yeah, find a concept that just arrests you.
Mm-hmm.
So like it might be a small aesthetic element, a small tiny aesthetic element in a very large army that you just want to run with.
Right.
Like for me, it started with forest goblins. There was one unit, one,
mm-hmm.
and I was like, I love those guys. They're little Indian feathers. I want an army of them, and then that began my project. Right.
Right.
And so my encouragement is, find something that you're just passionate about, that you just want to run with,
and then things like the art of the world can be good for this. The army books themselves will often have discussions of other weird versions of the armies that there's not really miniatures to support, like specific clans or things like that that don't necessarily exist in the sculpts. Those are great places to look for inspiration.
It's true.
Yeah.
And so find something that you're just passionate about and that you want to bring to life, and then just do it.
Absolutely.
And I know like this is going to be really easy to say, but at the end of the day, like converting can be a very expensive hobby.
Sure. But the more you go over time, the longer you're in the hobby and the more random bits you build up, actually, the cheaper it gets. Like these 3 prototypes that I built, like the first gyrocopter, the steam tank commander, and the free guild general and griffin, were all basically $0 because it was stuff I just had around.
Absolutely. But my exhortation to you, and this is not going to be an easy one, is don't let price stop you.
Sure. Absolutely.
Because I don't know if you remember, Vince, when I was waffling about my KO. Um, because like nobody was selling the Slayer like Mohawk bits, which meant that like every time I was going to have to get Mohawks, I had to buy a box of Fire Slayers,
Right.
and I wasn't going to use them. Like again, I was joking around about it being the most expensive army, but I mean, there's truth in that. Let me exhort you to say you don't like, even if it's going to be expensive, there is a secondary market for bits. And so sometimes you don't have to buy the full kit. So like when you're going to do a conversion project, like again, planning
it out and like just hunting for a while, right?
Yes.
Like if you don't need it to be now. There's been kits where I was just like, I just watch every couple days. I'll search on eBay, see what goes up, and I just wait it out.
Yeah, and just be patient, because sometimes that stuff will go up. Sometimes it won't.
Sure.
And when it doesn't, if it does look like it's going to be an expensive conversion project, find ways to mitigate that cost. So like what I ended up doing was with my Fire Slayers is every box of Fire Slayers I bought, I just went and resold the bodies online.
Sure.
And so I got it down to where I was only, after the resale of bits, I would only pay $1 per Mohawk extra.
Nice.
Which that's pretty good off of a $60 box.
Yeah, sure.
And so so be patient. Go slow. If you're going to build a stock army that you're going to lose motivation on in 6 to 9 months, or spend 2 years or 3 years hobbying on a passion project, because it takes you longer to save up, it takes you longer to acquire the bits or whatever, do the longer project. You're going to thank yourself for it later.
Yep, I agree. No, I totally agree. And find something and make it your own. There you go. All right. Well, with that, we bring the show to a close. So thank you, everybody. Remember, #ShelvSlaanesh. And that won't make any sense to people who joined midway through, but you can go back and watch my long discussion on that earlier. But at any rate, we thank you all very much for watching. We really, really appreciate it. And as always, we'll see you next Wednesday.